whatever, and we all vote on what our groups want to be called for like 2 years. Did you just smash your head on the? Are you sure? So like, and then if you use those terms in the next 2 years, nobody gets in trouble, nobody can get canceled. Like that's it. And then every 2 years we revote. You know what I mean? Like, because I feel like at some point, like Asian is not. It's not gonna be like we already talked about this. Like, I don't know if like Asian is like okay. So like I need like Asian people to be like these are the terms that everyone's allowed to use for us.
I don't feel like saying. I don't like saying the Asians.
What is that? What is that for?
I don't like saying the Asians. Give me some more light.
Do you need that though? Like that's intense. You need that? You really do?
Hold on.
Wait, so is this for you to just so that you look good on the fucking Zoom? Is that what that's for?
So you can see me.
Yeah, y'all, you're not muted.
The puzzle finally fall into place. What we need is more vaccine. With millions of doses now steadily coming off the line, it's up to states.
Mic is on. Be ready whenever you are.
Because I don't see Chief now.
Mr. Chair, Chief Tracy is here.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Chief, are you able to hear me?
Finance Chair, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. I'm trying to do it from the office this time. So I'm here with Marshall. So I want to make sure everyone can hear me. All right. All right. If everyone's ready, good evening, honorable members of council, Chief of Staff Washington, Chief of Staff Walker, department heads, and members of the public. This evening, there are two budget hearings scheduled. The Wilmington Police Department at 4:30 p.m., followed by the Wilmington Fire Department at 7 p.m. I would first like to start by recognizing members of the Finance Committee who are in attendance. At this time, I'd like to do a roll call. We have Vice Chair Harley.
Present.
Councilwoman Oliver. Do we have Council Member Walsh?
Here.
Council Member Field?
Here.
Council Member Spadola?
Here.
Council President Congo?
Here.
All right. At this time, I would also like to recognize any other council persons present by doing a roll call. Councilmember Dixon? Councilmember Cabrera?
Present.
Councilmember Fields?
Present.
Councilmember Darby?
Present.
Councilmember Gray?
Present.
And Councilmember McCoy.
Here.
Also would like to recognize the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Ms. Washington, Council's Chief of Staff, Mr. Danny Walker, Robert Greco from the Office of Management and Budget, Rob Winkler from OMB as well. And we also have with us this evening Chief Tracy, Inspector Ash, Inspector Emery, and Ms. Marshall Bassnight, and other panelists, as well as the public. Thank you. Mayor Pursuant presented a proposed budget to Council on March 18th, which shared his vision for the intended planned use of proposed budgetary funds. Now, during the month of April and into May, it is Council's responsibility to review the budget in the hearings with the various departments, so we can complete a plan. Our charter, Council must adopt a balanced budget, and it should be the duty of Council at least 30 days before the end of the fiscal year to adopt the annual operating budget for the next fiscal year. Council has already shared its priorities with the mayor, which are inclusive of public safety, specifically gun violence and youth intervention, neighborhood stabilization, education, and parks, just to name a few. The pandemic has, of course, impacted the world immensely. Nonetheless, the city is anticipating receiving $55 million in American Rescue Funds, which we look forward to collaborating with the administration on effective use of the funds. Just to be clear, again, for those who have not already seen the previous budget hearings, the American Rescue Fund is not factored as part of this budget because the actual permissible use of the funds is unknown at this present day. Before I turn over to Mr. Winkler for a budget overview summary, I would like to inform everyone that public comments will be asked at the end of each department's budget hearing, and that we look forward to participation from the public. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. If there is any additional follow-up during any of the budget hearings, Ms. Bassnight will track and follow up on those questions. I ask that if my colleagues have questions, please use the raise hand feature. Everyone should know that by now. I think we have gotten pretty used to that by now. And if anyone, again, during the hearing, if you need to message me, we're not in person, just send me a text directly if you're a council member. Without further ado, Mr. Winkler, I turn it over to you for the financial overview of WPD's fiscal 22 proposed budget, followed then next by Chief Tracy, and then the question and answer by council. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'd like to be acknowledged, Councilwoman Oliver.
Okay. So acknowledged. Thank you, Councilman. All right, I believe OMB. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
So, okay.
There we go. All right, next slide, please. All right, good afternoon, everyone. So today I will be providing an overview of the FY 2022 Police Department budget. And just as a reminder, before we go any further, you can find additional details on this in your budget packet, as well as in the budget book on page 78. All right, so excluding the state pension contribution, the proposed FY 2022 general fund budget is $59.2 million, which is up $1.6 million or nearly 2.7% compared to the FY21 budget. Personal services, which make up 90% of the department's budget, are up $748,000 or 1.4%. Material supplies and equipment, or MS&E, is also up at nearly $536,000 or 19.1% compared to the 21 budget. And total staffing across all funds is 380 FTEs, which is up a net 1 from FY21. Total authorized strength for sworn officers is 319, which is up by 4. All right, could we get the next slide? Thanks. All right, so let's take a look at the major funding changes for FY22. So starting off as part of an FY21 budget amendment, the department added 1 sergeant and 3 patrol officers to support the body camera program at a cost of nearly $385,000. In addition, 2 teleserve operators were upgraded to emergency call operators for a bit over $2,000. And finally, 3 vacant support services positions, which includes a police records specialist, a communications and data specialist, a document management technician, were deleted for a combined savings of nearly $199,000. All right, so excluding the position changes that I just detailed, regular salaries are budgeted to increase by $1.1 million. And this includes a $500 addition to rank and file base pay, which took effect in FY21, as well as a 2% FY22 COLA and mandatory step increases. And the other major personal services change for FY22 is a reallocation of budgeted overtime to better reflect the historical actuals. This involves a decrease in the regular overtime, which is down $404,000, and an increase in special events overtime, which is up $202,000. All right, so moving on to materials, supplies, and equipment. As part of the previous slide, please. Thank you. As part of the FY 2021 budget amendment, the city entered into a 5-year contract with Axon to provide officers with body camera equipment. For FY22, the cost of this contract is $265,000, which is net of nearly $88,000 in grant funding. And this is budgeted under the contracted maintenance services line. Also in contracted maintenance services, there are 2 other major changes. And first, the department's requested $185,000 to upgrade the security camera system at the public safety building. Second, the annual contract for the ShotSpotter gunshot detection system has increased by $81,000 as the FY21 coverage expansion, which was partially grant funded, is now paid entirely by the general fund. And other notable MS&E changes include a $105,000 increase in consultants to cover the biennial promotion process, a $70,000 increase in the ammunition line due to significantly higher ammunition prices. All right, finally, machinery equipment has been reduced by $250,000 due to the completion of the FY21 purchase of additional neighborhood cameras. Okay, so those are the major police department changes for FY22. If you have any questions now, I am happy to take them. And if not, Chairman Johnson, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Rob, for sharing the important overview. As we know, this is a really bigger budget in terms of the city. So now, actually, before I dive into the question, I wanted to first just kick it to Chief Tracy and Inspector Ash. Is there any opening statement you would like to make, Chief?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. First, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Finance Chair Johnson, Council President Congo, and members of the council, the mayor's administration, and the community. With me today, representing the Wilmington Police Department, is Inspector Cecilia Ash, Inspector Charles Emery, Police Director of Policy and Communications, Dr. David Karras, Sergeant Monet Cintron, and Master Corporal Nellie Vega. We're not all on screen. We are separating. We're in different rooms, but you can see some of us. If I have to go for additional information to 1 or 2 of my inspectors or someone else will be able to jump on with your permission, Finance Chair. As far as the departmental vision, the Wilmington Police Department strives to enhance public safety in Wilmington and to further reductions in crime that our city has seen in recent years. We will continue to utilize each of our layers of crime control strategies, including community policing. Before COVID, in community policing, we ensured supervisors and officers attended community meetings and interacted with businesses and faith-based organizations and civic associations in their assigned areas. That took a little bit of an issue last year because of obvious reasons that we've all gone through because of these COVID restrictions. We've used Zoom as we're using now. We're trying to leverage that technology, and hopefully we'll be rolling out of that shortly. We look forward to returning as soon as possible. We also have the CompStat methodology. We have district integrity assigning the same officer to the same neighborhood each time that they work, so they get to know the people, the conditions, and foster those relationships to build trust. We have intelligence-led policing, group violence intervention, and the integration of NIBIN, which is the National Integration of Ballistic Information Network for firearm ballistic tracing analysis, that has done a tremendous job in helping us connect the dots, help our detectives work on these cases and get between and interrupt the shooting cycle between some of these shooting incidents that have plagued our city. Top priorities: reduce crime and shooting incidents is number one. Continue to enhance public trust through police legitimacy and procedural justice, improve performance through organizational discipline, accountability, communication, and personal training and development, and also partnerships with other agencies on prevention and intervention strategies, and especially with the youth. Top performance measures: above all, we evaluate our successes based on the reduction of crime, not the amount of arrests. We measure outputs and make sure that these outcomes are coming out in the right place. We also measure our performance based on relationships our officers have with the community and the respect that the community is receiving. And finally, we measure our successes adopting evidence-based strategies and new technological tools to help enhance public safety. I just wanted to have that as my opening statements. And if you'd like to get into it, Mr. Chair, we're ready to go.
All right. Thank you very much for that overview, Chief. Now, I just want to dive into kind of the biggest question right now, since we're still in COVID, is considering the COVID-19 pandemic, can you discuss your budgetary account lines that were directly impacted as a result, which resulted in reimbursement of CARES Act funds? And this would be CARES Act 1, which was funding from last year. Can you also specify what account lines could be impacted for this fiscal year 2022?
Sure. If we go to the next slide. So the city received approximately $12.4 million in CARES Act funds for Newcastle County. Largely only the Department of CARES Act eligible expenses have been payroll expenses, such as COVID-related sick leave, parental leave, COVID, overtime incurred in relation to COVID-19, and employee time substantially dedicated to COVID response, or employees who redirected response to COVID-19 and public safety payroll. As cases decrease and vaccination rates increase, the city should expect to see fewer occurrences of these payroll expenses.
Okay. Now, so with these funds specifically, what is the mechanism that you're using to apply to the county? So is it where once the funds are expended, it goes, then you make the request to county, or like what's the process, I guess, generally?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can, Finance Chair, if I can push this over, have Rob answer some of the processes, how all the money starts to come over from county. I could talk about the relationships within the Wilmington Police Department, how we've been expended them, and the checks and balances we put in place. But would I be able to go to Rob Winkler on this?
Okay.
Hi, so what was the question here, just regarding how this money was provided by the county?
Yes, Mr. Greco, specifically because this has come up in council meetings before. I know my colleagues will have had this question. Is what is the process? Because I guess there hasn't been, I guess, too much of a lens into the process. Can you describe the process from the time, I guess, this excessive funds are used to the time, the county provides payment? Like how does
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I heard you say Mr. Greco. Did you mean me, or did you want Rob Winkler?
Sorry, right?
It's the three Robs tonight. We have Rob Tracy.
Too many Robs here.
Rob Greco. Yeah, too many Robs.
Whichever person from OMB.
I think the Chief of Staff actually wanted to answer. I think the Chief of Staff had her hand up, and I'll defer to
yeah,
Chief of Staff.
Okay, you can step in here at any time, Rob, but the
Sure.
funds are reimbursable. So what happened is that Human Resources created accounts associated with the various categories. So if there was sick leave, overtime, or parental leave, there were actually codes in the system where if someone was out for any of those reasons, that report was generated and given to the county. And once that cost was incurred, it, like I said, it was reimbursable.
Okay.
Okay.
So is it more of an OMB function, and then it would be submitted to the county, and then the county would provide a check?
Yeah, I believe it was a wire. Yeah.
Wire. Okay. Is there, and I believe this has been asked previously, is there just a actual spreadsheet or breakout that OMB could provide of, I understand the categories, but actually of the account lines and how much they were? Do you have a breakout of that?
We do. We have a breakout by category personal services, and we have a breakout by department of the various types of payroll deductions that were done. Now, to be clear, that was the first amount of money that we got from the county, the $2.4 million. In FY 2021, the county gave us $10 million. They gave us $2 million over 5 months. And that was tied strictly and only to police and fire payroll. And that was what was used to then get the reimbursement in the wire. We just had to show the county our payroll for police and fire, and they would send the $2 million each month.
Okay. So are these funds still active funds, or will they be, did they stop at December 31st?
We have not gotten any more revenue from the county.
Are we, is there potentially, can we receive additional revenue, or is the fund tapped out under CARES Act 1?
I think on the CARES Act 1, right now, we're trying to figure out exactly how we're going to use the amount of money that we can get directly from the feds, which, as you were saying, could be in the area of $50 to $55 million. I don't foresee us yet asking directly for the county's share of CARES Act money, but we will work together with the county and the state to use these funds, especially if there's large infrastructure projects that overlap our jurisdictions.
So for the CARES Act funds, we won't be receiving any more beyond the 12 million that they've already wired to us. And the American Rescue Funds, that's a different pot of money altogether. And that money is going to come directly to the city. We won't have to transmit any reports to the county because that's money that comes directly to us. Once we receive the guidelines, of course, we'll know how to use it.
Okay. All right. So I believe this dovetails really well into question number 2. If there's no questions, are there any questions from council on question 1? Okay. All right. So question number 2 is that the American Rescue Plan funds that we talked about. So can you discuss, Chief Tracy, the tentative plan?
I have my hand up. I'm sorry.
I don't see it. Sorry, Councilmember Gray. We didn't.
Thank you, Chairman. I just would like to know, how was the money spent that we allocated for the police and the fire department's payroll that was deferred because it was taken care of by the CARES money? So how was that money allocated?
That money actually just came in and is booked into the city's general fund revenue. And the expenses also are coming out of the general fund. So it comes in as general fund revenue. The expenses and payroll are also on the general fund side. But there is no special fund or special revenue account for the police and fire payroll.
Thank you. I'm not sure that answered the question. We allocated a certain amount of money for the police payroll. But that money, because of CARES and their involvement in the pandemic, was paid with the CARES money. So what happened to the money that was allocated in the budget originally for their payroll salaries?
The money that was originally budgeted in the budget, the expenses still hit regular payroll. Where you saw the benefit was that we got additional revenue and it was booked to the revenue side of the equation. So all else being equal, we will have a possible positive fund balance now for 2021 because that CARES money flowed into our general fund and offset the normal budgeted police and fire costs.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So if now I believe would be a great time to move to question 2, which is specifically again about American Rescue Funds. As this is on top of everyone's mind, can you discuss the plans or the tentative plans for using this to not only fill budgetary gaps, but also for new programming, existing programming, or any other permissible use of the funds?
Is the chief going to do this, or this answer, Mr. Chair, is the same for every department? We're going to give this exact same answer because it's the same for every department.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe I kick this to chief. I mean, have you at night when you're sleeping or something, have you thought about, chief, if you could use it a certain way, how would you use it? I mean, it's just really, I'm just trying to get a fair question. I'm not going to, if it changes, it's fine. But do you have any idea of how you may want to use it if you could?
Anytime that we get any additional money, right now, we're looking at to try to be as fiscally responsible as possible within the budget that we have. This is anticipated money. I know it's not all going to go towards the police department. I don't know how much is going to shake out towards us as far as with other agencies. So it would depend on the amount of money, to depend out how it could be used, what the rules are going to be. And I think just even going to we have not received guidelines and from how we use these funds. So I would have a wish list, but it certainly would go into the same things that we're already doing now and looking to enhance what we're doing with public safety.
Okay, so would that be, I mean, I guess a fair question is, right now, is there any just thoughts of additional anti-violence programming or youth programming?
Depends on the amount of money that we have and how we can use it. Right now, I'm looking for as we're going to go through these slides, as we're going to go through the budget, I'm always looking for opportunities that we can supplement our budget and trying to enhance some of the things with intervention, prevention, evidence-based policing strategies, group violence intervention, looking how we can infuse social services, rehabilitate individuals, expand on our victim services, how they can go out both with youth response unit, victim services that do an unbelievable job that can somehow hit the places that education can't, some of those places where we know trauma that affects a lot of the youth in our city, that affects the educational status, their learning, and then sometimes gets us into some of the issues where we are right now, where we're dealing with some of the teenagers and young adults that are involved in violence. And although it's a small percentage, but it has a great impact on the city. And that's where I'd love to put a lot of the stuff is in prevention, intervention, so we don't have to go out and be in the place that we are now, trying to address some of the situations. If we get to it early, we get through the education, then it actually helps in public safety that when we're at the point where we're arresting young adults with record numbers of firearms in the city, that's a failure at points getting to that. So I think that's the long term. Short term, I would look at certain things that we have. You're going to see funds to combat violence, to go into areas with the same officers to make sure that we can enhance that area, to make sure that we're looking at individuals that have the highest propensity for violence and not arresting everyone, Chairman. making sure that we're being very strategic in who we arrest, work with the community, and make sure that we don't have to arrest everyone to get very positive results and bringing crime down and safety to the overall city. So those are my big picture. I could probably, if we see where these funds are coming from, where they're going to be, I would enhance a lot of the strategies that have worked at other places that I've been at, have worked here that we've saw. And you know, last year is a bit of an anomaly, not just for Wilmington, but for the rest of the United States. It's been experiencing some of the things, but as we could see, we're starting to stabilize, continue with the strategies, and should be enhancing them. And then we're having some reductions that we're seeing right now in the first quarter of this year compared to some years past.
All right, I believe Councilmember Walsh has a question.
Chris, you have to speak up.
Councilmember.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question or just a general observation, but my understanding, which could be wrong, is that anything having to do with the CARE Acts right now, it wouldn't be the supposition of what a department director would like to do with their department, because all this would have to come through the mayor's office anyway. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And so you were talking about the violence program, but waiting to see how much money was going to come in before any firm announcements were released. Is that correct?
Yes, we're still waiting on the guidelines. We have no idea what the allowable uses of the funds will be. So, you know, we don't want to start, you know, rubbing our crystal ball on how we would use it until we are, you know, certain that we can use it for existing programs. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now.
There's a few. I believe Councilwoman McCoy next.
Actuality, Councilwoman Gray had her hand up first, but I can go if you like. I just wanted to state, this question is actually for Chief of Staff. She talked about the allowable uses. This act has actually been passed some time ago. Why is it that we're still waiting on what we believe will be the allowable uses? When these bills are passed, guidelines aren't already put in place so that we know what we can use them for? I'm just a little concerned that it's been weeks now and we still do not know what the allowable uses are.
Yeah, they haven't released them yet. So there's different guidelines. There was different guidelines for the CARES funds. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to be different guidelines for the American Rescue Funds. They're two different pots of money. And so when the CARES funds came out, actually the guidelines didn't really come out before them. They came out like a little bit, maybe a week or two after we're notified that they were getting the funds. I mean, that the funds were released, but we haven't received anything in regards to the American Rescue Funds. They're two different pots of money.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. May I follow?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I am aware that there are definitely two different pots of money. It's just that with everything that actually went into putting this bill together, I just thought that its usage would also be really defined when it came out. To still be waiting on it for this amount of time I just felt it was unusual.
Yeah, we constantly are in meetings with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities, and everybody's still waiting. We were just on a conference call on Friday with the county executive, and he's, you know, everybody's in the same boat when it comes to these funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe Council Member Gray.
Thank you. I think Ms. Washington has said mostly what I was going to say. I hope we don't ask every department how they speculatively and in the future are going to possibly use the rescue money. Like someone said, I think the answer is going to be the same. And since we have no guidelines at this point, I don't think that we should get our hopes up and start looking at different programs that we think may fit into guidelines we are not even aware of. But I wanted to ask the Chief of Staff, I think in another meeting, you indicated that you were hiring a professional to help interpret the guidelines once we get them. If so, when is this person supposed to come on board? Thank you.
Well, the actual, that person was just about, they're the ones that are going to make sure that we're in compliance when we're using the funds. So, you know, they're in the budget for FY22, so we can't hire them until July 1, FY22, but we will be looking, you know, in the interim. But yeah, they're a part of the FY2 budget.
Thank you.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify a point just for the public is that some of the questions may seem repetitive, but we do make this this process easy to digest for members of the public. So like they may not have seen the other budget hearings. So it's unfortunately a question we may ask in future hearings, but it just sets a record. So just to let inform the public that we're staying abreast of the American Rescue Plan. So and maybe by next week we might have more guidance. So we never know.
Yeah, and just so you know, the answer will be the same when fire presents this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Chief of Staff Washington. And Vice Chair Harley has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Chief of Staff Washington, if we have guidelines that are coming out to guide us as to how those funds are going to be used, do we really need a person that will be paid $75,000 to make sure that we're compliant when you have you have a finance director, you have the OMB, I guess I may have those letters mixed up a little, but it just seems like you have very competent people within the administration that could support that effort if we already have guidelines. We have guidelines that we have to adhere to. So, you know, that just seems to be a stretch. $75,000 for a consultant to do that. That I'm just making a statement, a comment, because it's been coming up quite a bit, and it's kind of interesting because we don't even know what the guidelines, but we're putting money in a budget to make sure people are going to comply, that the department's going to comply, and it is almost seems like, you know, putting the cart before the horse. You know, when you come up with a dollar figure, you don't know what the guidelines are, but yet a dollar figure has been earmarked for someone to do that. A follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
The second bullet here, it says, it is anticipated that the funds will be used to cover revenue shortfalls, pay for infrastructure improvements, and neighborhood stabilization efforts. Now, this is under police department, so maybe I'm not totally understanding who this is coming from. So we're going over the police department. So how does neighborhood stabilization efforts connect with the police department? Or maybe I'm just not fully understanding something here. What does that look like? That should be the question. What does that look like as it relates to the police department? That's the better question.
No, so it's really not related to the police department. And I think the chairman spoke to it early on, that this is the same answer that every department will have, is because from the broad perspective of looking at what the possible use for the money will be, it will be for covering revenue shortfalls and paying for infrastructure improvement and maybe some neighborhood stabilization. That's why this is a canned answer, and it's going to be the same for every department until we know otherwise.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now we can roll into question 3. Oh, sorry, I'm not able to see as well here. Council President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with Councilwoman Harley and her concern about the allocation of $75,000 for someone to look over the guidelines for that money. Can anyone speak to that from the administration?
Yes, I can speak to that. So it's just not for the compliance part of it. I said in the first budget hearing that this person will also be looking at the fiscal health of our city in the long term and how this revenue turn has impacted us, and with the best use of the funds in terms of revenue shortfall, how we use it for the long term to make sure that our city's in good fiscal condition. So it's an assessment in addition to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Vice Chair Harley, I believe, has a follow-up.
Yes, so as it relates to this consultant, is it going to be a professional person with a background that will be able to determine that and to evaluate that? Because when you think about this pandemic, we all are experiencing something that is new. And I'm just trying to understand, like, how would that consultant be, how are they going to be, what measures are going to be used to determine that they will be the best fit over those that are accustomed to working with our budgets. And when we look at how well the city has performed as a government, when I look at the administration, I look at city council, I think that we have done a pretty good job. And so I just don't want us to underestimate the experts that we already have in-house versus bringing someone in unless they are, work with FEMA before, or if they work in an arena where something catastrophic like this has happened. So I'm hoping that this consultant would be someone that has a background that's familiar with catastrophic situations or force majeures and things of that nature. Thank you.
Yes. So can I respond to that, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes,
so
please.
We're looking along the line of, like, we have a financial advisor. The city of Wilmington has a financial advisor. So this is really geared to a financial advisor, someone who understands government, particularly the city of Wilmington. So we currently work with PFM, and they have advised us along the way on a host of fiscal issues that we face. So it'll be someone in that realm.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll be clear. All right. Now I want to roll into question 3, which not sugarcoating it is probably a biggie. So it's a question that I think we have to ask, and it's a question that is very important to the city as a whole. So considering the gun violence epidemic in the city, a pandemic in the city, particularly with youth, discuss the planned budgetary resources and programs for preventative measures to combat the violence. And then also share any collaborations you have with outside organizations to make this happen.
We can go to the next slide, please.
Yep.
So one of the things I touched on when being speculative about if we got any additional money, Finance Chair, we asked where I talked about intervention and prevention. One of the most important things I think we have is department's youth response unit and youth intervention specialists, both work in support of youth affected by violence and trauma, both through direct services and referrals. They're assigned right here within the Wilmington Police Department, and they have a satellite place to go just in case to have confidential meetings with individuals that not to come into our facility here. We actually gave a presentation at the last public safety meeting at length on what they do and how you can get in touch with them. So I not to, in deference to the time that we have to give the whole presentation here today, we can go back to that. There's certainly supporting documentation on it, but they're invaluable as far as what we can do and get to these individuals at younger age and try to make sure that we can help them through some trauma so they don't have issues later in life. Then we also look at youth with the highest propensity for violence, and this is through the Group Violence Intervention Program. This is supported through the state and the state social services, and its programming is designed to help those individuals out of the life of crime. It was designed for adults, but we were starting to see last year and late 2019 to start to see an uptick in juveniles carrying firearms and the propensity for violence to actually shoot at each other. So we actually pivoted and took a national program, and then now have custom notifications and juveniles brought into these rehabilitation programs as an extra layer with the police department to see if we can stem some of these issues and make sure that we're a good partner with the rest of the criminal justice system, with our social services, with the courts, with the judiciary. And then we meet just even this morning. I'm with the governor's group called the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group. We meet with intervention, prevention, reform, and then looking at legislative issues that we vote on through Criminal Justice Council. And we're doing good work here. We have defense attorneys. We have people that have degrees in as social scientists looking at this, as well as judges, prosecutors, police chiefs. And we look at these things to make sure we're trying to set these individuals that might have lost their way, try to rehabilitate them, bring them back into the fold and reduce the violence. So there's a lot of things that are going into this. And this is where I think it's really important because the less the rest we have to make, that's actually a positive thing. And that's where we want to be. And as police chief here, I believe in this when it first came through the door. And I look to see how we can expand on it and make sure I work with our partners to see if we can improve on it.
So, to follow up, Chief, your youth units are they their police? They're units within the police department, right?
Well, they're actually clinicians that are civilians that work in conjunction with the police department as far as where a lot of their referrals come from police. The one thing about police, we're actually the most foremost arm of government where we're called for service and we see these things up front. And then if it's neglect or abuse, obviously we'll take immediate action. But when it comes to something that hasn't raised to that level, we'll give referrals to our youth response unit to reach out. We ask the families or the situation that we see, can we have the youth response unit talk to you? Can they come visit? Can they make a call? And then they go out and respond or have a phone conversation to see if they can help this family out and any child that's affected by trauma to make sure they can get the needs met, to make sure that we can put them on the right path so the trauma is reduced. When it comes to youth intervention specialists, that's what they're trained to do. This is not police officers. This is absolutely civilian, and this is and they do a great job. And the presentation we gave a couple of weeks ago showed the type of work that they're doing and the effect that they're having.
I believe Council President Congo has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the chief. Has funding been increased to either one of those departments in light of the increase in violence for fiscal year 2022?
Some of these, we actually added a position last year in our last budget, and we also have a grant for an additional person in the last budget, but we haven't increased for 2022.
Okay. Council Member Gray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chief Tracy, some council members just had a presentation from all places, Minneapolis, on their crime prevention. And it's a federally funded and state funded and city, but it's a federal program. And one thing they stressed was involving community members. I like to call them ambassadors, but people, members of the community that either have been involved in crime or involved with the police or just know a lot of people and they can traverse between communities also. Has there been any outreach to use individuals like that and reaching out to the youth and helping with crime?
Yes, Council Member, absolutely. The group violence intervention, we actually had former Police Chief Bobby Cummings, who's the director for group violence intervention. That model that you talk about, group violence intervention and focused deterrence is part of same thing that Minneapolis has. And we do have former justice involved individuals that can talk people through their experiences. And that's really the moral voice of the community. And also to talk them and be the referrals for social services to show that the help that they got set them on the right path. And then some of the hires right now that they're doing in group violence intervention are the same individuals that you just mentioned that the Minneapolis program uses. So very similar models. And we are actually doing some of the same things.
Oh, great, great. I'm glad to find that out. Thank you.
Get cut off. Okay. Council. Can you hear Councilmember McCoy?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You said council and then it kind of dropped off. Thank you.
I think it may be our direction.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you very much, Chair. I kind of wanted to follow up with Councilman Gray stated because we did receive quite a bit of information from that. I believe it was called the Office of Violence Prevention from Minneapolis. Now, I actually started looking at some of the focuses that they had, like those pillars, and I was so glad that we actually already have the GVI, and we also already have the CIT, I believe. But some of the things that we actually we still don't have. There are probably about at least two other pieces that we really needed to focus on, and just wanted to know whether or not when it came to that whole programming from Minneapolis, were there just certain aspects that we felt that we could concentrate on here, or did we not have the total funding to do all of the actual pillars that were making this thing work in Minneapolis? Because their numbers are 5 times our city, but they're actually starting to see I guess some responses. So we just wanted to know, with our numbers being so much smaller, we may not need as much put into it, but we probably will still need every aspect that they focus on. We'll probably still need them in order to make certain it work. We cannot, if it takes 5, I don't want to just see 2 different focuses. That's basically what I wanted to make certain that I got across. And I'm definitely willing to have a conversation further just to share all of the information that we received from Minneapolis.
Absolutely. And some of the pillars that you talk about, for time's sake here, group violence intervention can take the next 2 hours. I would love to go over some of the pillars to make sure that these things are matching what you saw from Minneapolis. I know of a lot of these programs. I've been involved in both in New York and Chicago, and we've looked at all the types of models that have been out there. But we're always looking to see how we can improve. And in each city is you can't cookie cut this. They're all unique in their own way. And if there's something that we can do better or look at, we're all for it. What do you have to lose? And let's make sure that we're doing things. The biggest difference I've seen in different cities, some of these are self-sufficient as far as not relying on state services. We have to rely on a lot of the programming and the social services because a lot of it comes from the state as compared to the other places. It was self-sufficient through the city. And, it's just where we're at, but that doesn't mean we can't be as successful if we run it the right way and look at all those things. So absolutely, anything that we might be missing, I'd love to sit down, talk about it. And if it's something that we have to do or change or look at that we can enhance, I'm all for it.
Okay, may I follow, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that, Chief. One of the things that I would like to state is that it does seem as though some of that programming and those funds were not just primarily from that city and state, it was on a federal level as well. So I would just hope that the people who are actually writing grants for our police department are actually looking at more, rather than actually getting gadgets, but actually looking to looking to access grant money federally for programs to see whether or not we can actually decrease our crime and all the stuff that's actually happening in our city with our youth.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gray?
Thank you. Chief Tracy, I've been reading a lot of statistics. I'll just call it blue fear of where a certain percentage really high of the police calls are related to non-police work, really like domestic violence and drug abuse or drug overdose. And various departments across the country have hired individuals to answer some of those calls that don't wear a blue uniform, because a lot of times with mental health issues that traumatizes the person. So can any of the funds of this coming year be put to that use, since there's frequently mentally ill or people who are ODing that the police have to respond to, and that would take some of the pressure off of them and also help the public not respond so negatively in these type of situations that can escalate so easily?
You know, when it comes to social services, I think a lot of those things, these things are so dynamic, these calls for service. In policing, we are absolutely, we're a default for, if there's a fire out there, we're responding just to make sure if there's public safety issues with people, we're going to get there with the fire department. If there's going to be emergency run for a health issue, we're also going to respond to make sure, because we are out there, we're covering the same areas. So we do on those calls for service until we're cleared. A lot of the mental health issues, you know, what I see that we should be doing, and we continue to do within this police department and my last department, is continue to make sure we have the best training possible, that our officers recognize mental health issues or things, or where I call it crisis intervention training, where most of our department's been trained, and then take it further, juvenile crisis intervention training. So we take it a step further, because we're always going to be somewhat of a default, because these situations where we're getting called, they turn violent very quickly that's happening, and might not be anything with the police response, but going there. I'm speaking to a lot of my colleagues throughout the United States. I was just on a national call about the same issue that you're talking about. And, you know, can a city sustain hiring enough mental health experts to be available to respond 24/7 to these issues? There's a lot of gaps in the issues where they can't do that right now, and it's starting to slide back to the police. So I want to make sure that if we're going to do this and roll out, that it's something that, where is the money going to come from? Is it from the calls for service? How are we going to do this? How is it going to be rolled out? Where you're going to get these individuals? And then issues that are set up. A lot of them are going through very early stages. And I don't know if the measurement's been out there on how successful or not successful they are, but hearing from some of the city police chiefs in other areas that it's being done right now, it's a mixed bag right now. So if it's something that we'd like to explore, you know, we can do it. I don't know the effectiveness that it would have right now. I think the most effective thing right now is to continue to make sure we continue to train our officers, because training, you know, is the thing that people are going to default to in a crisis situation, especially our officers. And we continue to work on de-escalation. We continue to look at things that we can use as far as what type of equipment, what type of technology we can use to slow things down, to make sure that we can slow the response down as soon as we're there and everyone's safe, or make sure that we can cover the perimeter and keep everyone safe. And there's certain situations that I can't get into on this, that our officers have handled very well when it came to people with mental health issues, even this year, that, you know, a lot of restraint was used. It was because of the training. You really, when you start taking a look at those costs, I don't know those costs yet, but to have someone out there right now, you know, we can certainly look at a pilot to do something, but we got to figure out where the money's going to come from.
And Chief, I just want to clarify something. Are you aware of the Denver Star pilot program? I believe that's one of the latest ones that's out there. They just had a report in February 2021 about their data.
No, I have not looked at that data.
Yeah. They have some data. I know many cities are doing pilot programs, so that is something that you'd be interested in looking into, right? Okay. I believe Vice Chair Hartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the topic of training, which I am happy to hear that term being used tonight. I know that last year we had talked about WPD training for the officers around cultural diversity. And one, I'm hoping that this training that you have mentioned several times includes cultural training. And I say that because when you think about what's happening within the city, and we know that the majority of the crime that's taking place, whether it be Black on Black crime or whether it's situations as it relates to relationships with our officers and community, having that diversity training that deals with unconscious biases, that deals with, respect and tolerances and things of that nature. Are you selecting training that covers those topics?
Well, one of the things coming in with procedural justice, police legitimacy, that was a program that was created and a strategy for training a few years ago by Tracy Mears, Tom Tyler, David Kennedy, and these individuals are the foremost experts on racial relations and help create the legitimacy that's being used by a lot of police departments, and it does cover implicit bias. That being said, we also have a certification through the state called Commission on Police Training, which I also sit on the board as being the biggest city from police chiefs and other people in the criminal justice system. And now we're looking to expand it to make sure that there's a community voice. We have a mayor that sits on it from one of the cities south of us, and we're looking to expand that to make sure that we're more transparent, to have a community voice on that. That Commission on Police Training already has implicit bias that all our officers have to go through to be certified as police officers and continued, we call it in-service training, where they get trained every so many years to make sure that we're in compliance with all the designations that this Commission on Police Training, we're part of it. And I also added that police legitimacy, procedural justice. Just because I have a minimum training requirement doesn't mean I can't go above it. That's some of the things that I saw was very effective. And it does cover cultural diversity. It does cover implicit bias. And I think the biggest thing that really helps you overcome that, have that training, keeping the same officers in the same area. So you get to know the people in the community and you're not getting different officers each and every night. And therefore you develop the relationships and then you can make sure you can build that trust. It takes time. COVID really knocked it out with the relationships last year, but certainly we're going to continue to work on it, continue to stay with that philosophy. And yes, we do have it.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you.
I believe Councilwoman Oliver,
Yes.
she's next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to wait till you get to some of the questions, but when Councilman brought up training, that is one of my questions. I'm looking through the Wilmington PD's budget. I didn't see where any mention of training in here, and I was wondering what line would that be on, because I didn't, just looking at it, I don't see where you have a line that you are doing intensive training or diverse training or anything such as a commission or police training that you said that you're involved with. I just don't see anything in your budget that even mentions training. So what line would that be in?
A lot of that would be under human resources. We have our own human resource department. We do our training, in-house training with the type of schedule we have. We have Tuesdays for training that's rotated through the month that all the units get trained. We have, if you start getting into the grants, we have the Sally and Sleeve grants that we make sure that we use to enhance our training for our police officers on top of, that's already built in from, our training. We have hybrid here, even during the police academy, our people from human resources, and then we pull individuals that are certified instructors off some of their out of their units 1 or 2 days a week to help the police academy go, because they all have specific or actually certifications that we continue to train ourselves. It's called in-service training.
Right. Excuse me, Mr. Chief. I understand. I was just asking you a question. I was just wondering why wouldn't we see some type of training just in your package? Why isn't that visible?
It actually is visible, and I'm not sure. We'll get to it when it starts to get to grant funding. Okay. And then some of the things that you're going to start seeing the training on our police academy. You'll see the course that it takes our officers to the police academy. And then most of the courses are covered with individuals in the human resources unit, and then the in-service training. We're certified because we have our own certified police academy. We have certified instructors. So we continue to train ourselves. And then we help supplement that through the grants that you'll see with Sleef and Sally.
Okay. I mean, when she brought up training, y'all start talking about training. That was one of the questions I had. So right. I didn't know if I was jumping the gun. I just heard you talking about training. Okay, I have another question. I'll wait till we get a little further down. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman. All right. Is that
Councilman Harley's hand is still up?
Vice Chair Harley.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, sorry. We saw you. All right.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So if there's nothing else on question 3, I would like to move on. And again, we'll touch this subject on, I think, some later issues as well. Question number 4, discuss the funding, proposed funding for policing oversight.
So on our oversight, on this slide and additional slides after this, we have an Office of Professional Standards that fields complaints, handles internal and administrative investigations. We have software platforms that track injuries, uses of force, and other investigations. It also includes an early warning monitoring system that if an officer is even coming into late and it's monitored, we're starting to see systems that come over or things that are repetitive. We red flag them and look to see if we can monitor what's going on with this officer's life so it doesn't translate to something that could be a possible problem out in the streets. So it's called early warning monitoring system, and it's through a platform called IA Pro that's nationally recognized. That I inherited it coming here, but I also know there was advancements that you can do that we've actually brought it and enhanced and leveraged this model a heck of a lot better to monitor our police officers. So, you know, these things that we do, the body worn camera is another oversight tool that's going to be implemented shortly. And then additional, if you go to the next page, additional oversights, just even what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 other bullet points, and I'm going to get into even more specifics. You have a mayor and city council that have oversight over the Wilmington Police Department. You have the Delaware Department of Justice Attorney General's Office, specifically Office of Civil Rights and Public Trust, and the Delaware Council on Police Training. That's the thing I talked about with the training. We have to meet the minimum standards. We have the governor and the state legislature. We have a U.S. attorney, as well as other federal law enforcement agencies and authorities, especially with the FBI, that a department works with on federal task force. Also, they can look at the things that we're doing. And, you know, so one of the biggest things is that the public, we answer to the public through complaints, compliments, things that they can bring about what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, where we need to improve. And, you know, if we take a look at a police department, you know, the oversight is provided by WPD supervisors, including 38 sergeants, 11 lieutenants, 7 captains, as well as 2 inspectors that are on, and myself. We have an entire division, human resources division I talked about with that training, which under the guidance of Inspector Emery and Captain Bowers, focuses a large part of their time on police academy training and ongoing training and development for all officers, policy updates, and compliance. I also want to, it's important that women through the state of Delaware has some of these robust checks and balances that we talked about. Office of Professional Standards, oversight by the mayor, legislative branch of city government, Wilmington Law Department, which reviews and improves policies and procedures, and legal counsel, advice and guiding to routine basis. Wilmington Wilmington, City of Wilmington Human Resources, which governs policies for employees throughout city government, including many policies that pertain to police officers and the role of city employees. We have the Office of Civil Rights and Public Trust out of the Attorney General's office. We have the Delaware Council on Police Training. We have the governor. We have the Delaware State Legislature, U.S. Attorney, federal and elected officials. And then finally, like I hit on before, it's the public. That's probably most important. Members of the public in our community and elsewhere routinely making suggestions, sharing concerns, feedback, engage with our officers, command staff, civils, at all our meetings and civic associations. We attend all community meetings, receive firsthand suggestions, concerns, and questions from neighborhood organizations, planning councils, and homeowner associations and other groups. So there's so much oversight when you have a partnership with all these agencies that can make sure that we're doing things in the right way, trying to be as transparent as possible. And I think these are some of the things that we're doing and will continue to do and try to enhance to make better.
No, Chief, I'm going to ask a fair question, but I mean, you're aware the City Council 107th session authorized a police oversight board. Where's your funding for that board? Is that in your proposed budget?
Well, that funding is not in my proposed budget, but I think it's something that I know the mayor and the administration has had conversations about possible funding that would come from their office at this time, should we go that direction. So I'm actually, there's nothing in my budget. We're still waiting to see exactly how that would be set up, what the cost would be, and the ability for the effectiveness on the legislation that's in place at the state level. So right now, having a civilian complaint review board, I've been part of 2 other departments that have had them. I've worked very well with them, had a great partnership with them to make sure that the community was served and also that board was served and it was as efficient as possible. So having that right now, there's nothing in our budget right now on that.
Okay. Councilmember Spadola, you're first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Chief Tracy. A question for you. Just doing some quick math, $60 million overall police budget, $2 million for the Office of Professional Standards. Can we go back one slide so people see what I'm talking about? $2 million for the Office of Professional Standards, around $800,000 for body cameras. So it's around $3 million in police oversight out of a $60 million budget. So around just under 5% of the overall budget. What have you seen in other big departments, percentage-wise, do departments allocate for police oversight?
Well, that's going for all the salaries for police supervision, and as an oversight. Have I seen it? It's been very similar, and I think one of the most important things is that you have to make sure that you make the investment where you're looking at between internal affairs, Office of Professional Standards, discipline, and making sure progressive discipline and correcting behavior before it goes to a behavior that we see in some of these other places that it's not going so well. I don't think it can ever be overstated to make sure you have a professionally run Office of Professional Standards, and then the salaries that we're talking about, in the individuals and the software, it's on par with other places to ensure that we make sure that the public can know that we are policing our police officers. And then all these added things that you're seeing, just what the 107 Council just talked about, is putting the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and that layer of about more than a dozen layers of oversight that on top of what we have in police, that I just went through and ticked some of those things off, first with bullet points, and then I expanded on it in my narrative. I think we need that. And then even within an organization, Councilman, it makes an organization more legitimate, because you have to have internal legitimacy, and all the offices, they want to have a robust, legitimate oversight, even within the police department, because police officers want everybody doing the right thing. Because when there's one officer, we can have one officer out of 319 do something that's not right, and it affects us all. and that's not what the officers don't want that either. So I believe we're in the right place, and that type of investment we need to make.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, for the record, I'm not implying it's high or low, just
Right.
curious where we are relative to other departments with that.
All right, Councilmember Darby. Oh, wait, actually, before that, with Chief of Staff Washington, you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that when we submitted our budget, we had a conversation afterwards with City Council regarding the funding for the Oversight Committee. So you won't see it in the Police Department budget, but that doesn't mean that it won't be added at some point in time or even covered through maybe the contingency fund if necessary. But that's a conversation we had after the budget was already submitted.
Okay, thank you, Chief of Staff Washington. I believe Councilmember Darby is next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had a question in regards, and we kind of hit on this when I met with you, Chief, but in regards to the internal complaints and complaints for police officers, so the police oversight. I think it's important that in the budget, we actually have something where we're marketing or doing some type of awareness campaign so people know the process to be able to make a complaint. So we talked about this. People do not know that there's even a way to report that a police officer has done something, right? And there's a lot of people in our community who don't feel comfortable going to a police station to make a report. And some of the things we talked about was that there's a way for you to go online. I didn't know that. There was a way for you to go to another building and make a report on a police officer. So I feel like a lot of the complaints that our department currently have, it's very low because people don't know or don't feel comfortable coming to the police department to make a complaint about a police department, knowing that it's all internal investigations and it's all inside job that is done in regards to the investigation. So one of the things that I want to look forward to or see in the budget is that as we're talking about police oversight and we're talking about professional standards, making sure that what ways in the budget are we putting money towards making sure the public who we serve are knowledgeable about the services that they do have to either, a complaint or to put in a good case for a police officer. And that's all I have, Chair, for right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilwoman. And I know we had a robust conversation about that and some of the things that even when I came here 4 years ago, that was some of the things that there was pamphlets, they switched things up. So I inherited a process I thought was pretty good. So you didn't have to just come into the Wilmington Police Headquarters. Now there's other avenues through. You can make it by phone. You can make it by visiting headquarters. You can make it by dropping it off over in the city county building, and you can make it online through our website. So there's certain other ways. And then a couple of years ago, this came up also in the Public Safety Committee. We talked about it, and then we added. You talked about not only complaints, but compliments for officers at the same time. And we always can enhance on how we get that message out. And as I said, sometimes it's assumed everyone knows, but I'm sure making sure how we get the message out. And I'm sure with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and we can continue to try to educate the public on how you can come in or make those complaints or compliments and the process behind it.
All right. And Chief of Staff Washington, I believe you have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to lower my hand. Sorry.
Sorry. Should have done that for you. All right. Thank you very much, Chief. And I believe Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding on the Oversight Committee was that until the committee itself could have some teeth in it, that it wasn't going to be funded. Because why were we going to fund something that really couldn't hand out any type of discipline or anything really? It should have had a fiscal note on it if it had that type of power when it was passed. And until the Police Bill of Rights is rescinded through the state, that just won't be there. So I'm getting a little confused over the question as to why there should be funding when this is something that just really doesn't have any teeth in it at all. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That's all I have.
I think you're absolutely correct, Councilmember Walsh.
And I believe this is maybe more of a question for committee, but I think we're probably at a standstill, I guess, in terms of what's going to happen at the state. I think it's a question of politics. It's a political question, because I think we have a situation where I'm not sure. I don't really have faith in the General Assembly right now. I know what we have going on down there. Maryland just repealed their law enforcement officer bill of rights, so I think that's
yes,
more.
I saw that.
Yeah, I think it's more of a question we should probably discuss in committee, just because there's too many unknowns right now. Councilwoman Oliver.
Yeah, I didn't hear what Councilwoman Walsh was she talking about the Oversight Committee? I'm sorry, Review Board. I didn't hear a question.
Yes, yes, it was.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard it right. I didn't hear the question. Thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Spadola, is your hand still up?
Oh, sorry, that's from before.
Oh.
I know I did, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Oliver. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I didn't hear because I was looking at this card, following up with Councilwoman Darby said about information to the public, getting out how they can put in a complaint, etc. But I was looking at the Wilmington Police, the Wilmington Department of Police, the Victim Service, one of these cards. I mean, maybe it could just be added on there if you have a complaint, because you do have something that y'all give out for as the victim services. So maybe on this card you could just add if you would like to put a complaint, so it's not so hard for individuals who wish to put in a complaint and don't know a way or have a way of feeling comfortable putting in one. Because I know, just for example, several people who may call the police for whatever reason, and I always thought it was heartbreaking that they would call trusting the police station, and then an officer come out. I guess that's part of the training, and just say, well, I received a call from someone on your block. So I know we had somebody who wanted to report the officer and the car number when he said that was last summer, but maybe just a suggestion, maybe you could put something on a card, or maybe have a discussion with Tanny, Chief of Staff, or Daniel, so we can follow up on that conversation, because that's a very good point. Nobody knows how to even put in a complaint or even say some good things about officers. That's it.
Is there any comment, Chief Tracy, on that?
We actually, that was given out a few years ago. We've talked about it. And 2 years ago, it's something that if there's ways to improve to make sure that the public knows, we'll continue to make sure we can get it out to civic associations, make sure that we can get it out through the council office to the constituents that you serve, which we all serve as well. And we'll continue to try to educate the public on how they can make a compliment or a complaint against our officers, because we need to hear those complaints. If there is a complaint against an officer, if it's a one-off, then we figure out, we investigate it, we get back to the person making the complaint. If there's several complaints on an officer, that starts to show a pattern, whether it even starts out with disrespect. We want to make sure that if they start to see a pattern, that's something we can address early on. So just like with crime complaints, we encourage people to make those reports, come in. If you don't report it, we don't know. And the same thing happens with the community. But keeping the same officers in the same area we start to learn real quick if they're in the same area, if there's starting to be an issue, especially with the type of supervision and keeping the same supervisors with these officers in that same area. And this is an added thing that we can look at. So obviously, any way we can do this better, make sure that more people are educated on how to do that. We'll continue to look at ways. We'll revisit the pamphlet that we had, make sure that it fits all the things that we're doing in 2021, and we'll take a look at that.
All right, Chief, thank you very much. Moving on to, there's no more questions on question 4, question 5. Can you discuss the plans for the city to continue participation in the Fed Up Operation Heat program? And specifically, Chief, I've noted that last fiscal year, there was 0 funding for the special federal gun program. So, what's the plans to actually put this back in the budget?
Right. Well, we haven't. This hasn't been in the budget for now the second year. But we obviously, just because something's not in there doesn't mean that we don't have things in place to make sure that we're addressing this and interrupting the shooting cycle. We maintain close partnership with the governor and the state of Delaware through group violence intervention. So this is making sure it's not just a fully enforcement action, but more a voice of the community and social services that we can help the person that has a high propensity for violence is identified as probably a shooter or a victim of a shooting, how to get them out of that life of crime, and also make sure that we can keep them safe and make sure we can rehabilitate them. We also work with the Delaware Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office. We meet weekly to discuss and review cases. We have intelligence meetings with all agencies on shootings that are happening, similar to what was happening on the Fed and Operation Heat program. And then we have federal adoption of Wilmington cases, particularly related to gun violence and serious crime, that we're doing this not just even on weekly meetings, but several times a week. And then we're talking in real time that we have adoption programs where the feds are even come in with people who are going to carry firearms. They'll adopt the case without waiting for a weekly adoption case, that we work with ATF to make sure we can get ahead of those that rise to a level that we can take federal charges as opposed to waiting whether they go state. So it's very similar to what this is doing, and it has a profound effect when we start making sure that we're coming out of COVID. Everybody things that actually were put on the back burner, not because people didn't want to participate, because the COVID effects really was a bump in the road for a lot of these programs that we've had, and especially when it comes to making arrests. We didn't have any grand juries, and we didn't have any trials going on last year. So that's all starting to come back, and we're starting to see it in some of the numbers right now. Finance Chair, we're starting to see some of the things compared to. We got a long way to go, but it's certainly not where we were last year, not where we were 4 years ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief. Moving on to question number 6. You discuss any vacant position.
We'll go to the next slide. So on this, you get 1 civilian position in our Human Resources Division, information, 2 emergency communication specialists, 3 emergency call operators, and 2 teleservices that will probably fall within our academy.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Any question? Moving on to question 7. Can you discuss any proposed changes to positions, new positions, deleted positions, upgrades, downgrades?
Chris, you have the red.
Sorry, I was moved a little too fast. Okay, so we can go back to question 6. Councilmember Walsh. Okay, well, she might be having technical difficulties. Councilmember Oliver, I guess you can go first.
Sure. The emergency communication specialists, are them the 911 callers? Or emergency communication specialists, what are they exactly?
These are dispatches.
Right. Okay. what's the know what emergency call, emergency call. Are these job posting, where are these job posted? Are they in HR for the city of Wilmington, or where are they posted?
They're posted on the City of Wilmington Human Resources site.
Okay, good enough. Thanks. That's it.
My question was answered directly, Mr. Councilmember Johnson.
Okay, thank you. And then Councilmember Spadola.
Thank you, Council Chair. Chief, since you've been with Wilmington, have you done a cost analysis of the Wilmington Police Academy, and if it's a cost saver for to send copies?
I've looked at the training that we have. I think it's advantageous. There's a lot of police departments that would like to be in the position that we are, because it can never be overstated. If I send them to a state police academy, or if I send them to the county police academy, they're not trained being an urban police officers, and to deal with certain things that we have an ideology in the way that we wanted to make sure that our officers trained in doing policing, that we have to make sure that they understand from the beginning and from day one when they walk through that. They're going to be running up to 10 miles in the next couple of weeks, but they're in the city, they're running in the city, they're learning in the city, they're learned by our supervisors. I have control. If I'm going to be responsible for right from the beginning, for they understand what our expectations are, and as our community's expectations. I haven't really looked. I think the other academies are going to charge me once a cent from the outside. So I think I really haven't taken a really good look, because I have at this time feel that we're pretty fortunate to have our own police academy, to have our officers from day one and trained by us to make sure Wilmington and be as prepared as possible, where I don't know if I'm going to have that comfort level going out to another police academy.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. Who's training your trainers? And do police officers ever go back through the academy?
With our officers, who's training our trainers? So that's where the Sally and Sleeve grants come in. And we're able to send our officers stations. Now that can come through some federal training, that can come through some state training. We in the state of Delaware, we have a commission on police training, and with it, the certifications to be a trainer. What we'll do is when our officers are trained, we train the trainer, which can train other officers in our department through their certifications. The second question, how do officers stay in shape? How do we make sure? Here's a unique, coming to the city of Wilmington, there's two things that didn't happen in New York and Chicago, is that I didn't have to take a physical every year. And here I have to take a physical on top of my doctor that's hired out by the city of Wilmington Human Resource. And we do our blood pressure, eyes, ears, blood work, EKGs. So they look to make sure that we're physically fit. And if we're not, we have to get that corrected. We also have things that for promotion, you will get actually credits, whether it's within the police officer rank to corporal, senior corporal, or master corporal, or within the sergeant's ranks, where it'll definitely be for master sergeant and senior sergeant. These things that we do, we encourage people to stay in shape. We look at this, and then there's incentives to make sure you stay in shape. And then if you're not, you're going to be caught up at the yearly physical, which wasn't done in my other places, which I highly endorse here to make sure our officers are in the best shape possible. And it also helps us out to make sure we can catch something early if something should be wrong with one of our officers physically.
Thank you, Chief. Can I follow up, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think that's wonderful that you're giving the officers incentives to stay in shape. But when you say physical, does that mean that they can walk or run a mile, or we're just talking about metabolic physical? It sounds like we're just talking about metabolic physical, which is better than none. But I'm just talking about the ability of the officers to move.
Well, if they're immobile, like you're absolutely right. We incentivize them to stay in shape, but we also at the end of the day, if they're not, a lot of the things are going to show up in the blood work. A lot of show up EKGs, and these are certain things that will come up and have to be addressed. It's not perfect. There are systems out there that actually, if you don't run or if you don't keep your body weight under a certain level, those things are worked out where you have to be put on probation all throughout your career. There's a certain cost that goes to that. But right now, as we're looking, we're not in a perfect situation right now to add those additional costs. I think the system we have is the right, didn't look like you can walk a block and you'd still be put in uniform. And that's not a good look either.
Thank you, Chief.
And I just wanted to just inform also the council members and the public as we go through this process that we're going to be, a lot of these questions are fair, but we do want to stick to the budgetary question committee to discuss the academy, because there is another question coming about the academy. I just wanted to stick to the budget and the cost of it more than what the specific programming is. So thank you very much, Chief. Now I believe Council Member Cabrera is next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chief, thank you so much for coming out. It's wonderful to see you and to hear about all the things that you're doing with the department and the inspectors. My question, and this has come up through the years, and it is a cost saving, and I know it's not in this budget, but this is something that has been looked at many times again, and I'm not sure why Wilmington is resisting it. I know that everybody likes to have ownership of their own programs, but the 911 system, why can we not move this over to them and you're just transferring to Wilmington? And that would be a huge cost savings for the city of Wilmington. Not only that, the technology, the resources that they have. And I know we've done a great job with our system, but to me, it just seems like this is when we can look for cost savings and budgets and try to work together with the other government entities. Is that something that you foresee that you could look at in the near future?
It's certainly something that we can look at. It's something that we have looked at. I know before my time, it's been looked at. There's going to just like with an academy, if I outsource it, a police academy, when I have an existing one. Right now, because I'm on a public, I say this internally, but this week is communications week to honor our 911 and call takers and dispatchers. So I want to tell them they're doing a wonderful job, and I appreciate the work because they're invaluable on what they do and the work that they're doing downstairs. And being this profession, I think sometimes it's underestimated, the work that they do. I appreciate it. And for them this week, they're being recognized, and I thank you for that. But coming for fiscal responsibility and putting, combining, once again, I saw this in Chicago. We're still going to have to outsource, and there's going to be a cost to us if the county is going to do our 911 system. And within the strategies that I'm able to bring in and build off the strategies we hear, you start to have an outside component conflicting with the things that we want to do here, because it's not just all about a 911 call. It's about district integrity. It's about the supervisors having a role to override the dispatchers who might want to make a call. I mean, we have a garage burglary that's in the past, that's 5 hours old in Browntown. The way we used to do things here and the way it might go back to is that you're going to pull the person that's in Riverside just to go handle that report because nobody else is available. I'd like to hold that, wait for the officer to come off that works. And when we were in Chicago, we had the hardest time because we outsourced our 911 to get them to come compliance in our police strategies. And communications is definitely, I'm just giving you where I come from personally in my experience, but it's not something we couldn't look at, Councilwoman, and make sure that, hey, would we really see that cost savings? Would they charge us? How would that work? And then let's take a look at it. And then I can add some of the things on my personal experiences, my professional experiences, on how I see them operating within our own strategy methodologies here in Wilmington. But it's something that we should look at. Certainly, I can ask to make sure Inspector Emery looks at and say, hey, what would the cost be? Fair question. I'm just giving you my crime fighting experience, how important they are. when they come under your roof, and maybe the costs are too much and we weigh that risk.
May I follow up?
Under your-
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with that said, Chief Tracy, I want to be very clear. It's not just about cost savings, it's about efficiencies. And you mentioned that in your response. So if what we're doing is the most efficient, it's not broke, let's not fix it. It's not just about looking for the cost savings, but my understanding from the previous years that this has come up and it has been reviewed that we would actually see some efficiencies there, and there would be some costs, but not necessarily what we are spending. And I do not want to undermine in any way, shape, or form the work that our current 911 operators are doing. I understand that, you know, Hollywood might be fiction, but my son and I are very much engrossed in the 911 shows, and to see how things are handled, and having been there for multiple tours, I commend the work that they do. Thank you for bringing up that this is their week to recognize them. And I want to thank them on behalf of myself and the residents of Wilmington for all the excellent work that they do. Thank you so much for answering the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, Chief, move on to question number 8. Can you discuss, 7, okay, 7, okay, sorry about that. Can you discuss the proposed changes to the positions?
We can go to the next slide. And so this is where doing some of the analysis, the teleserve operators positions, we found that the workload analysis that was here, that we have more efficiencies if we made them emergency call operator positions. So that's some of the things that you're seeing changing, moving over, and making sure that we're looking at the department to make sure that we can be fiscally responsible at the same time not losing the efficiencies. The amount of calls that they were fielding it really wasn't worth the cost, and I'd rather roll them back over, roll them into emergency call operator positions.
All right, moving on to question number 8 now. You discussed the department's authorized strength proposed at 319 officers. I believe this represents a 4 FTE increase from last year's budget. And before you dive into that question, Councilmember Darby, do you have a question on 7 or 8?
I had a question on 7. Chair.
Shoot.
Yes, I wanted to make a recommendation. I wanted to see a change in some of the positions that are within the Wilmington PD. I think we should be focused on additionally to having police all be community officers, building a team of a community response team, right? And this community response team will include social workers, mental health people, to be able to help officers respond to some of these calls that they're getting that's out of their scope of work. And I believe that this year we could start off, there's 3 sectors, and in each sector there's 3 districts, so a total of 9 districts. We could start out with 3 social workers to cover each sector this year, and then keep building on it to build a full out community response team where we have social workers, we have mental health people, we have all sorts of things to build a team of like a community response team. So I would really love to see that, hopefully in this budget, if possible, where we can fund 3 additional social workers to provide and start the start the idea of a community response team for each sector within the police department. So that's just a recommendation that I have, something that I'm pushing for. I think is really important that as we're making sure that police are trained to respond to some of these things, they're still not experts. They still did not go to school for those things. They still do not have the proper training, even though they may take the proper training or degree or education for it, just because they take a few days training on basic knowledge of certain populations or vulnerable populations that they're working with. So I think it's important that we have an expert to help our police department deal with some of the things that we're seeing in our community, from homelessness, mental health issues, domestic violence. But so that's just a suggestion that I have. I hope that you guys will take that suggestion for this budget this year.
Okay. So Chief, I guess, is there a quick response, or is this something?
There's a quick response. I mean, as we go to these things, we do have the additional backup on when we go to scenes or some of these issues. We do have a community-based program. Every officer, well, it's not going to be, I'm going to make it as short as possible, but we do have a community-based program throughout the department. We do have people we refer to within the department to deal with these things. We do have Christiana Care. We do have non-for-profits. We do have the courts when it comes to mental health. Instead of making arrests that make the determination if people have addiction issues, they're all things that we are trained on, but we're not the experts in. But we make sure that we make the proper notifications for that net, that safety net behind. And you know, there's a lot of talk about can we do social workers? I think we hit on that in the beginning when Councilwoman Gray had asked that question. There is a cost to it, and we talked about it with some of the models that are being used in the United States, but it's something we can always look at. It would never say no to look at things, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in this budget, but it's something we can take a look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. And that rolls right into question 8 about the increase of, you went from 315 officers last fiscal year to 319. Can you talk about that and why there was the increase?
Yes, actually, that was a budget amendment in last year's budget to go to 319 officers that was approved because of the anticipation of the body-worn cameras, making sure that we have a technical resource unit. And this was something that we've talked about at many public safety meetings and also the overall city council approval to have that a budget amendment to go to 319 officers last year. We're just continuing them in this budget. So it's the authorized strength is staying the same for 319 officers for the body-worn camera. And as I look at these numbers, some of the answers, we're still at 319. Our actual strength is 304. We're down 15 sworn police officer vacancies. The current operational strength, that's where we're at right now with military deployment, modified duty personnel, and also 19 recruits. I'm seeing a little error with the math there. Well, it should be 271, but that's a dynamic number. Who's out sick, who's injured, and everything else. So it should say 371 is the operational strength. This was done last week. It's at 269 this week. So before anybody else catches it, I'm seeing a little bit of an error in the math. So it should say 271. That's such a dynamic number. Military deployments change each and every week. Modified duty personnel change as well. So that number changes day to day.
Okay. All right. Is there any questions on 8?
Next slide, please. And it just talked about where our other officers are. This is where our 6 school resources officers, as you can see, their monthly contract and the costs that go below in the fine print. And then once again, D goes to the 1 sergeant, 3 patrol officers assigned to the technical resource unit to manage the body-worn camera program.
All right, thank you very much, Chief. Bear with me. All right, I believe we're ready to move to question 9. Can you discuss the plans for the new police academy and budgetary costs per account category? I believe it's actually a good thing. I mean, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. So if you could touch on the matter we did not address earlier, that would be great. So the floor is yours, Chief.
Yep. So as you can see, 15 to 20 recruits are anticipated. We need to go down 16 below 319. As you can see, we're at 304. And the timeline, the process, really, if the academy goes, we're going to have a graduation at the end of this month. But now we're still down 15, 16, which trigger that for us to come before with a resolution for council about starting a new academy class. But it's approximately 23 weeks. Graduation, also sign field training. So once they graduate the academy, there's another year that there's field training, field training officers to evaluate them out in the field to make sure that they're still on probation. And should they remain as a police officer, then they're always going to be evaluated throughout their career. The approximate timeline is from start to finish after they're out of the academy. And then if you go to the next page, This is the cost. This is a cost for a fixed cost for the academy class projection. That's for 15 recruits. You see by the yellow on the bottom.
It helps. There were some questions earlier, I believe, Chief, about the cost of us doing it versus doing it with the county. So this helps clarify that, correct?
Correct. And it's something, you know, I gave some of the reasons why I kind of, if we're going to model the police officers to make sure we can have the police officers ready to police in the city of Wilmington, it wouldn't serve us very well for someone else to train to make sure that, you know, we got to get them right from the start. And that's where the evaluation period for the 6 months in the academy and then the year of field training officer courses go.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Moving on to question 10.
Now I had a quick question.
Okay, Councilmember.
Yeah, I just want, I was wondering, I see the overtime. I was wondering when we put in a piece of legislation about, I see you say you have the psychological testing per recruit. What is, have you tapped in yet into anybody's Facebook, their social media or the tattoos? Have you had a chance to tap into that, or that's forthcoming?
Social media has always been there. That's you know, in this day and age, you can learn a lot about what people have done, not just recently, but what they've, you know, when you do something on social media, it stays with you for a very long time. And we do, on top of our overall applicant investigation, which is about 80 pages on each applicant, we look at that. We look to see exactly some of the things that the patterns and thoughts that they posted that they thought were okay. That certainly comes in. And then the psychological that, you know, I know Councilwoman Gray always talks about this, the MMPI that's used by our psychiatrists for the city, that it's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And right. it really looks at mental health professionals use it to develop treatment plans, assist with differential diagnosis, help with legal questions. They screen job candidates, and they use it for selection process of personnel. And
I guess, no, Chief, I think you misunderstood. I would just ask you two questions. You answered the first one.
Sure.
In reference to the social media. So you're saying during recruitment, y'all do look at you do look at the recruiters' social media. That's correct, right?
Right.
And the second question was, do you take into consideration about various tattoos? Like I see, like we can identify gang members, et cetera. Do y'all take that into consideration?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember. Now, moving on to question number 10. Can you please discuss the approximately $497,000 budgeted in temp salaries for crossing guard? A special recognition that the city of Wilmington is the only, you know, a city that pays for crossing guards in Newcastle County.
Oh, right now, last year was a year where the schools were out. We've looked at the funding that we have in place, and we're not presently considering outsourcing crossing guards to Newcastle County at this time.
I mean,
you are, you're not? Oh, not, okay.
We're not.
Good.
And as a point of clarity, Chief, I mean, considering we were in COVID, were there even kids weren't in school? Was there a cost savings last fiscal year?
Well, like other city workers, I understand that none of them were fired, but based on all the other individuals that were city workers, they were also paid based on the monies that we received. We paid them, right?
Yeah,
yes. There was no school in session, but they were still kept on salary like a lot of other city and state workers.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I mean, is there, and again, this is a kind of it's a hidden cost, but it's a bigger cost. I mean, And I know you're not planning to, but is there possible, again, we talk about consolidation of resources. That's $500,000 right there. I mean, is there any even survey?
We can take a look at on how they're doing it in the schools in Newcastle County to see if it's funded by the state or it's funded by the county. I'm sure even when individuals say, why don't we bring the county and state to help when we do patrol in the city, that comes with a cost because we have to pay them to come in with the city, and it's usually on overtime. I'm certainly, if I have to look at it, I'll definitely have our human resources unit look at this to see if this can be done, what is the type of cost that I can get back to the council and follow up with that question. Instead of just leaving out there, the answer is no. I know it's been looked at before, but under my time, let me take a look again and then see exactly are there costs that the county or state would charge us to be doing this. And I'm not sure the reasoning. All I know is that, they do a very good job. Once again, I appreciate the work of all their employees, not just the police officers, but every civilian that's on this job. They do a tremendous job, and I know everybody feels that way. But I got to put that out there publicly because I do appreciate the work they're doing. And if they're absorbed by someone else and still getting a paycheck, they're still going to be doing a wonderful job. So, Finance Chair, I will take a look at it.
And that's all council would just like to look at the feasibility of it, as Council Member Cabrera talked about 911 crossing guards. I mean, that could be $500,000 to $1 million as savings we could, invest in some other programs that we talked about. So that's all. Yes, I just want to get that in the future. Now, turning to question 11. Vice Chair Harley has a question on 10, I believe.
I think it's on 11, so I will wait until after Chief talked about.
Can we go?
Yeah.
All right.
Next page.
This is $2.556 million budgeted in the overtime account.
So we go to the next page.
Yes.
$2.56 billion, as you can see, it's used across various divisions and units within the Wilmington Police Department. You got Division of Overtime, you got Crisis Management Tactical Team, City-Sponsored Events, Parks and Recreation, Drug Organized Crime Advice Division, and the K-9 unit overtime. The $135,000 was civilian holiday overtime, covers contractual pay requirements for communications division personnel, and the court overtime is used for officers who are required to appear in court when outside regularly scheduled shifts. If we continue to the next slide, please. And then, the questions, the reduction in overtime was how we got there was how the close monitoring of personnel resources, optimizing the grants that we'll see in the upcoming slides, as well as the decreased overtime connected with COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of the events and everything that happened years past, last year, they didn't happen because people were social distancing and events weren't happening throughout the year. We did have other things that were going on between protests, and we balanced it with that, and then also Democratic National Convention and all those things that were happening. So an overview of the grant is presented, that's in 17, and we have no additional costs budgeted in reference to support and security of President Biden while in Wilmington.
As a follow-up to that, Chief, I mean, is there a reason why you don't anticipate additional costs? Because I understand looking through the expenditures this fiscal year, there's been a great cost, obviously, with the DNC convention and President Biden setting up the station here. So it wouldn't be, isn't there idea of some overtime costs we're going to need, or you're not anticipating he's not going to come to Wilmington at all?
Well, there is going to be some costs, but not to a point where we've had to put, we're looking to try to be fiscally responsible and everything. In years past, in the last few years, we've come under overtime costs each year because of the checks and balances and justifications for overtime that we put in place in the Wilmington Police Department, and what our supervisors and our 2 deputy chiefs have been doing. Changed the process in the Wilmington Police Department, and still we're getting very good results in crime reduction. We've also increased the amount of state and federal funding that can help us supplement some of the things that we were doing, that we were not getting that money in the past, that we should have been getting the money. So with this, we're being, it's pretty tight what we're going to do moving into the future, especially for 2022. But I know as part of the division, looking at where we are financially, there's some things that I wish I can have more money, but I also know that we have to play our part for the city and be financially sound in trying to meet the goals that we put in place. So if there was more overtime out there that I can get this job done, I definitely would look to use it. But
now, Chief, as a follow-up, this may be a question more for OMB. I know during some expenditure meetings, there was discussion on still awaiting reimbursement from the DNC and from, I guess, the White House. Is there any update on that, whether city has received reimbursement?
Well, we're working right now. When they were here first, we had the DNC, which we were the satellite, but we certainly became the main focus coming away from the Midwest, coming here, and because of COVID and everything else, there was substantial cost that came to us, state police and county, because I had mutual aid and had to call in reinforcements. We just didn't have enough police officers. The whole police department was working. Also, then we had the victory speech that got delayed 4 or 5 days, but it's not something you can start on a dime. So there was certain costs that came out with that. We've been working with the Department of Justice. We got letters from both the DNC, and we also got a letter from the campaign that these were certainly events that we can ask for, and once they're acknowledged, we can ask and try to work to get funds. We were working with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, the Department of Justice, and we have been sending them justifications on the overtime that was expended not only by us, but the state police and county, and working together to try to get reimbursed. I want to manage everybody's expectation. We're trying to be reimbursed. And that's something that I think in good faith, we're trying to get done. We're in the process. So it's not that I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to get the money, but we have things in motion to try to be reimbursed for those events. Moving for the future, we're trying to work on the same thing with county and state and resources. Rehoboth Beach is going to take somewhat of an overtime hit. The state and county are going to take somewhat of an overtime expenditure. We're looking at that. We're not going to have things where the de facto headquarters was right downtown on Market Street. That was for several months. And the campaign and using all this. Now the house is outside the city. The Air Force base they're going to use, or how they bring the president in, and then going down to the vacation home in southern Delaware, might not extend to the overtime that we would put this in our budget. That's not to say we might have some costs, but nowhere near what we have. So we're not anticipating. And if we do, we're trying to work on building off what we're doing now to get reimbursement.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Councilmember Oliver, I believe your hand was up first.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement. I heard the Chief talking about, I guess, reserving the overtime, and I think you should give them the overtime if it's going to help protect their streets. And there's some other areas we can do some reduction, but I don't think overtime should be one of them, because I have 2 corners expressly, 10th and Pine and 23rd and Pine, that they can be on for a little overtime. So I'm totally for them getting the overtime if they're, why we needed to protect our city, and some of that other stuff we can do away with. That was just a comment from me.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, my hand is up. I was waiting. Remember.
Do you have a short response to the last comment, or no? Are you good?
Yeah. No, I was. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to make a disclaimer right here for the chief, as we talked about the overtime and increasing it. And I know that there was an uptick due to the civil unrest and the various, we had the marches and everything that went along, the protests. So, you know, I told him, I said, if you blow out your overtime budget, if things pick up again, then that one's on me. So I just wanted to put a disclaimer out there that he did try to fight for more overtime, but I think a lot of that was driven based on the political climate at the time. So I just, you know, just for the record.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And Vice Chair Harley, I believe you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So while we're talking about budgets and overtime and things of that nature, maybe it has been already mentioned, or maybe it hasn't come up yet, but what about the Citizens Advisory Board? I know when we passed the legislation, what is the update on that one, and does it need to be funded?
Chris?
Well, this was, I believe, we did touch on this a little bit earlier, Councilmember. I don't know if you missed it. Chief did delve into that. Chief, if you have a quick 30 seconds on that.
I think when we went into it, it's about what's going to happen in the state legislature, how it's going to fold out with the law enforcement Bill of Rights, what we can do, how it's going to be set up, what the costs are going to be, when it's set up, and I think that's going to be revisited at that time. And I believe Chief of Staff Washington addressed that they will start looking at funding should everything start to go through at that time. Chief of Staff, I don't want to speak for you.
No,
is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you worded it well. Yes.
Okay, one quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So are we looking for that information to be shared within the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months?
It's all dependent on the timing of the bill. If the bill passes down at the state level, it's a wait and see process, basically.
We're waiting on legislation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Moving to question number 12. Discuss the planned use of approximately $1.3 million for the real-time crime center. I believe that's a $340,000 increase over the last year's budget.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, overseeing this for many years and is involved in some of the questions that's on this, I have Inspector Cecilia Ash, and that's my subject matter expert. Can she just go quickly through some of these things, and I'll jump in where I need? That's okay with you, sir?
Yes, that's perfect, Chief. Thank you.
Inspector Ash?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon or good evening, Chair. So with this, part of this was the increase was based off of the contractual increase for the consultants that assist in the operations of our City Watch cameras. Even with their increase, that was in line and reasonable with your normal 3 to 5% increase that we see across the board from all vendors. In addition, you see that I believe there was a total increase of about $81,000. This was the final portion for us to take when we opted for the federal grant. We agreed that we would sustain that project by rolling it eventually into our operating costs. So this year we'll have that fully rolled in with that small addition of, I believe, $81,000. In addition, part of that was also the upgrade to existing cameras within the public safety building. And what I mean by that is we are required through CALEA as well as other security measures to maintain cameras and visual observation of our juvenile detainees or adult detainees to ensure and document any incidents in our turnkey area, any incidents in our public hallways, things like that. So this is an existing system. This isn't something that's being added. We are updating. I believe the system is about 20 years old. It's very antiquated. And then, of course, the body worn camera program, which this is our contractual year 2. There was a small offset, as Rob indicated, with the federal funds of about 80,000 that we were rolling over. So, and then additionally, currently, as indicated on the PowerPoint, we do have 95. That really should be, that's a typo. It should be 96 cameras citywide. And we currently have about 9 employees monitoring those cameras 7 days a week. So you have, as I indicated, the small uptick in increased allocation for ShotSpotter, and then the budgeted amount for the body worn cameras, which would be for fiscal year 2 of that 5-year contract that went before City Council.
Take it off, Michelle. So, Inspector Ash, this is I'm just going to ask some questions I know are going to probably be my colleagues have had. Is where are we with the expansion of the neighborhood camera program? I understand now we're at 95, and there's a working group. But how can we get to increased coverage? I mean, because you know, do we have a breakout per district even of those 95 right now?
Yes, sir. So currently within that, you have about 96 cameras citywide. If you remember last year for the fiscal year, and then I'll let the chief of staff take that as she's the chairperson for the camera working group. We had 10 additional cameras added in at that cost of $265, or excuse me, I think it was around 250,000 maybe, for 10 additional cameras to be put in the different council districts. So we base that on the crime rates within those areas and where the crime data demands are. So we would then say that, you know, right now, currently, we have about 86 that are deployed in the different council districts. And then 10 were spread over 5 or 6 of the 8 council districts based off of crime statistics. So I'll let the chief of staff take it from there.
Yeah, you captured it properly, Inspector Ash. We do have a camera working group, and she's correct. When we receive funding to install new cameras, that's a decision that's made by the police department based on the crime statistics. However, just 10 cameras was $250,000. So given our lean budget and understanding at some point when you continue to add cameras, you have to think about additional personnel costs down the line. And so this year, that wasn't a request from City Council. So we would have to entertain that at another point in time.
Okay, and is there, Inspector Ash, I know we're going to touch on grant funding a little bit, but specifically for cameras, or is there currently efforts to look at both state and federal grant funding for cameras since it's this expensive project?
Yeah, absolutely. So through the ShotSpotter grant, you know, we continue to look at different avenues and research mechanisms that the Bureau of Justice Assistance, you know, kind of asks police departments to do research. So along with myself and the chief and Inspector Emery, we continue to push the feds to give us additional money to look at sustainability of projects like this and expansion into areas that will enhance the ShotSpotter capabilities, tying it into the TV, excuse me, program. So yes, that's absolutely, we always, as the chief says, enjoy spending other people's money before our own.
Gotcha. All right, Councilmember Spadola, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
I'm curious why, thank you, Chair. Why are we getting cameras that need to be monitored? Can't they just be recording on a?
Can't hear. Mr. Chair, can you repeat the question, please?
It's not, it's Council Member Spadola.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Thank you. Why do we have to have manpower to monitor the cameras? Can't they just record? I mean, I think City of Newark cameras, they don't need to be monitored. They record and then record over themselves. So I don't understand why there's a correlation between having more cameras and more personnel to monitor them.
Chief, are you good if I answer that?
Go ahead, Inspector Ash.
So I think we just have to be careful when we're putting these cameras in high crime areas, that we're not putting ourselves in position of liability. And really it's a force multiplier for us to be able to take immediate action when they are monitored. I can give numerous examples of where, based off of the monitoring and the caliber of this contractor, that they've actually monitored, and we've been immediately able to dispatch officers out to people being armed or doing shots fired, and being able to pick those people up on camera. And again, it's a force multiplier. And to the best of my knowledge, I do believe that Newark and other cities like that do pay a outside contractor, and I think they're based in Newport to monitor their cameras.
So it sounds like, I mean, that's the first tier, obviously having them as force multipliers, but there is the possibility to have cameras that are just reactive for investigations where you could pull the footage after the fact, not necessarily, have police respond based on what's seen, but just in terms of, down the road, there are different options.
Well, absolutely, Councilman. Most of our stuff, for investigative purposes, being able to pull that, it certainly helps us out immensely in solving crimes. So it's a hybrid. You have them watching cameras, but we're not going to catch everything. Sometimes it pan and tilts in a certain direction, even on a corner where, like just luck would have it, we would miss something even in surveillance. So and then trying to pick it up on the next one down, and then using all surveillance, even with the community and with the ring cameras and everything, they're picking up things and we're using that as a force multiplier. But we have had some very positive results. As you can see, if you start doing the amount of employees for the coverage, we try to maximize them at the times when we think we need them the most, and we move them around during crime trends and everything. But as we get bigger and larger, if the expectation is we're going to monitor them, we'll probably have to hire more employees, because I don't want to give the unrealistic or expectations that we're monitoring all of them. So we got to make sure that we set up people's expectations, what we can and can't do, and what the costs are.
Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have about 3 questions. One, it was stated, I think by Chief of Staff, that cameras are expensive and that 10 costs $250,000. Well, it looks like we're allotting $323,000 for shot spotters. I don't know how many shot spotters there are, so that's my first question. It seems they're costing more. The other thing is, why did the committee decide that we wanted more shot spotters rather than cameras? And I think there's a mistake, because council's been asking for more cameras in various communities for quite a long time. I don't know how it missed this budget cycle, but that's been a big major issue, because we don't even know where the cameras are. And I don't think anyone really answered the question of how many cameras are in each district? How many cameras are deployed in each different districts? Thank you.
And before you answer, Inspector Ash, maybe just as a primer, I like to break it down easy for everyone to understand. Can you tell the difference between shot spotter and neighborhood cameras? I think there's a misconception about what the programs are. The public may not know. So just in a brief chunk, if you could explain that, and then you can go into Councilmember Gray's questions.
Yes, sir. So ShotSpotter is gunshot technology that we now currently have in about 5 square miles of the city. Prior to this grant, we had covered about 3 square miles. So with that, we now are confident that, and the reason why we applied for this is, sometimes you will see, we saw almost 77% of the time that we were missing or not getting calls for service in reference to gun violence that was occurring in a lot of these neighborhoods that we've expanded to. And as you do enforcement efforts, sometimes those areas and those people start to move. So with the research by the Police Foundation, as well as the BGA, that is what sponsored us not only getting the expansion, but also tying it into our existing technology, which was the CCTV program, to where the cameras, when the gunshot recognition goes off, the cameras will turn to those locations. So to your point, Chairman, they are two very distinct and opposite technologies, but it's about blending technologies and techniques that overlay multiple types of crime strategy. And go ahead, I'm sorry, sir.
And then I think that, thank you very much, Inspector. And then I guess going to just real quickly, Councilmember Gray's question, I think specifically about, I guess, coverage of the areas. And then I believe she had 2 additional subparts. So I don't know if you or Chief of Staff Washington can answer.
So if the Chief of Staff would like, I can break down the cameras and existing cameras by the council districts.
Please do.
Okay, so based off of the council districts, and keeping in mind that, you know, a group was created out of the mayor's office that has members and the chief of staff from city council on that camera working group that is chaired by the chief of staff, Ms. Washington, to where we review the current conditions of the cameras, the existing, and the future build out of those cameras. And that is so that everybody has a say in where these cameras go, but also making sure that we're putting cameras in the technology where we need them, you know, and where the data is showing that we need them. So with the camera working group, currently there in District 1, there are 2 cameras that exist there. In District 2, Council District 2, there are 5. In Council District 3, there are 14. Council District 4, there are 40. Council District 5, there are 21. Council District 6, there are 4. Council District 7, there are 9, and Council District 8, there are 1. And that is including the 10 from the budget fiscal year prior. Those 10, as I indicated, will get us to the 96. And I can, if you want, I can do the math and take out and just give you the 86 that are currently out there. But I wanted, you know, for full disclosure, to show that there are about 96 cameras that go citywide and what council districts they are currently in and projected to go into.
Thank you very much, Inspector.
You're welcome, sir.
Councilmember McCoy, Councilmember Oliver, I believe, is first. Sorry about that.
I'm okay.
You're okay? All right. All right. Moving on to Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question was more so about the shot spotter. I do understand about it, exactly what it does, and that it is actually a triangulation on where the shot happened. I actually was not aware that it actually has a camera on it, but also because of the fact that it's basically a triangulation, it's 3 shot spotters at once trying to identify where shots came from. How good is that camera information or whatever that you're getting from the shot spotter? Because personally, I do believe that if you were to have more cameras, I guess, in these so-called hotspots, it would, to me, shot spotter is so much reactionary, of course, like most policing is, but at least you'd be able to identify the shots was this person actually made the shots or whatever, and they're wearing this, that, and the other. And rather than the shot spotter just, I guess, trying to identify a runner or a car or something, because it just seems like it's so much more broader and not as specific as the actual camera.
Chief, are you good with me answering that?
Inspector Ash, continue, please.
So
Either one of you can answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted I'm sorry, just to make certain I actually really put it into a question. It was more so about why we actually chose the shot spotter over the cameras, because to me, I felt as though because of it being a triangulation, it's much more broader and not as specific as identifying, actual like a crime being committed.
So,
Finance Chair, Inspector Ash, can you just hit on that? This is a subscription 323 for the shot spotter, correct? Because we used to have a grant that used to cover it, and then we had to absorb the cost. Or was this the additional coverage?
So you're actually not, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just to follow. So you're actually not purchasing more?
No,
Okay.
we're not purchasing any additional. We're not purchasing any additional. This was a federal grant that City Council approved us applying for. Within that grant, what we were able to do was to expand ShotSpotter based off of research into areas where we saw that we were having gaps in correlating gun violence with getting reports of shots fired, but also, on the mayor's administration, doing the overlay of, to your exact point, how beneficial is ShotSpotter if all it's doing is giving us the reactionary ability, but by adding these 10 cameras and overlaying that with the crime data that proves that the cameras are needed in those areas, we're now able to do a multi-strategy approach to reduce the gun violence in the city and change the police department from being reactionary to being proactive, but overlaying multiple avenues of technology to succeed at that.
Thank you. I have one last follow-up, Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So the number that you had given for my district was 4. I do hope that that number actually is an increase from, you stated that there are 10, I guess, that are putting, like, the 10 are being added. So I hope that 4 is actually increased from another number, because I've actually been one of the people who've been asking for cameras for a long time. So I've never been given an exact amount on cameras that were in my district, but because of the fact that I've asked quite a few times for several years, I'm hoping that 4 is that number 4 was an addition of a camera or 2.
Yeah, you had 2 cameras that were added in your district out of that 10.
Okay, thank you so much.
And just for the record, just so I know there seems to be some misunderstanding on the ShotSpotter and the camera, neighborhood cameras. This is more for Councilmember Gray. ShotSpotter program does not come before the camera working group. So it's not like I chose one over the other, just so we're just clear on that point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, Councilmember Oliver, was there a question now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a statement. I am glad that it was 10 more cameras put out there, but due to the, the high number in crime here in the city of Wilmington, and looking through the budget and seeing that the police station got 185 new cameras, I'm sure y'all need them, but I think we need a little bit more put out there in our districts. I mean, especially in the 3rd district with the crime being so high. I'm sure maybe a 1 or 2 cameras were added. Hopefully, I don't need that number, but hopefully we can put more cameras in our community where this crime is taking place, and it seems to be increasing and not decreasing. Thank you.
All right, I believe Council President Congo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Inspector, can you give us a rundown of the districts and how many cameras in each one again, please?
Yes, sir. So what I'll do is I'll give what the current number is and then what districts had the additional cameras added. Does that work for you, Mr. President?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in District 1 has 2. District 2 had 3, and they're receiving 2 additional cameras to bring the total to 5. District 3 has 12, with 2 additional cameras, bringing that to 14. District 4 has 38 cameras, with 2 additional, bringing it to 40. District 5 has 19 cameras, with 2 being additional. That brings it to 21. District 6 has 2 cameras, with 2 being added. That's a total of 4. District 7 has 9, and District 8 has 1.
Okay. Just a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Council President.
How do those numbers relate to the shootings that occur in those districts and to the major crimes?
Yep. So back in when we were doing the initial analysis of the data, when we were advised that there may be additional cameras going out, what that broke down to is in Council District 2, the Washington Heights area, we had 1 homicide, 9 shootings. Council District 2, the 9th Ward, we had 1 homicide and 18 shootings. Council District 5, Hedgeville, had 3 homicides, 11 shootings. Council District 5, West Center City, had 1 homicide and 13 shootings. Council District 6 in Browntown had 3 homicides and 5 shootings. And in another part of Council District 6, where a camera will go, down in the Browntown area, there were 2 homicides and 3 shootings. So, and again, with this camera working group, this is information that is passed to the City Council on how these things are determined, and that was done through not only the working group, but also to the Chief of Staff in an email in January of 21.
Thank you. And just another follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Council President.
So Council District 4 has 38 cameras?
That's correct.
Have,
that would incorporate the downtown area.
Is that where most of the shootings and homicides occur, or most of those cameras for the business districts?
Those
Finance Chair, Inspector, can I please answer this?
Yes, please, Chief.
Yeah, the downtown, those cameras that were existing for years, and they were supported by the businesses, downtown visions. So we inherited a lot of them. What we're looking at in the camera working group is the expansion and migrating the cameras into other areas of the city. So it's not something that we've done anytime soon. They've been upgraded, and a lot of the financing comes from the businesses and the downtown visions. So when you see some of those coming, and then secondly, a lot of these, although it might be placed physically in a district, some of these are on councilmanic lines where they actually can cover 2 areas, but we're going by where the camera is physically on what pole and where it's placed. Rather, it might be surveilling also another district, but that would it would be very confusing to try to build that out. So we put it in the physical area. And then I just wanted to make sure that the downtown visions and the support that's given for the surveillance cameras down there started out many years ago by the businesses.
Okay, thank you. Just one more follow-up, please. What district do most of the killings and shootings occur?
I would say it within the sectors. I would say the 13th district. I would say the 16th district, although it's gone down. And then it used to be down in Browntown, but that's gotten a heck of a lot better. When I got here, Southbridge used to have it. That's gotten a heck of a lot better. And then from where we were four years ago, we're down 50% in murders, and we're down over 50% in shootings and shooting incidents where we were in 2017 at this time. But we're getting better from where we were. We can improve on these things. But I would say District 14, I would say District 16, and I would probably say maybe District 11.
I'm sorry, Chief. Are you able to assign those districts by councilmanic district?
I would right now. I'm working right off of what I do statistically and things. I don't have those shootings broken out. I don't know, Inspector, when you looked at them by councilmanic district, do you have those numbers? I know you reported out on them, and if you don't have them, let's make sure that we can get that as soon as possible back to the chair, to the overall council, because I want to make sure we give you accurate numbers, Council President.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
this new handwriting. Okay. Councilmember Gray?
Yes, thank you. Inspector Ash, I thought started off with telling us how many homicides there were in each district, and I got well, I thought she got to the 4th district and then stopped. Am I mistaken, or? There was 1 in 1st, 1 in 2nd, 3 in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th. Do you have the stats for the other districts?
The numbers that Chief, do you want me to, I'm sorry. So you unmute that.
Go ahead, Inspector. I just want to make sure that we did these off 2020 numbers. These are numbers and we want to make sure that the numbers that we're looking at are accurate, or were these the ones that, why we chose these areas?
That's correct, sir. So these were the numbers, as I indicated from the prior question. They were asked, why did we put these 10 cameras in these locations? The information that was relayed was the data that was collected and provided to determine those 10 new locations. That is not the overall statistical data that is reported, publicly through ComStat. That is just the supporting data that for those 10 cameras.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, then what I think I want is what Chief Tracy said you should send to us later. I would like to know it broken down by councilmatic districts, how many homicides and shootings have been in each district in 2020. Thank you.
And I just wanted to follow up, Chief, because I believe there's a disconnect, is that is the neighborhood cameras aren't strictly for homicides and shooting prevention, it's for overall neighborhood safety, correct?
Well, that's the plan for it, but sometimes we prioritize through some of the violence and to make sure that this is just another layer on top of a whole comprehensive strategy. Can we leverage technology? But we're pulling stuff from Ring cameras and everything for package thefts. So it's really how you look at it. We got to prioritize within it, but it could be used for all types of crimes.
Okay.
Especially if you look at downtown, where it has 38 cameras and Downtown Visions is monitoring that. They're not getting this. They're not looking at the same things that we're looking at because there's different issues that are happening in those areas. But that's being supported by the businesses.
Okay, got it. All right, and Councilmember Oliver.
Yes, this is my last question. I had highlighted something, so I said it wrong. When I looked at the budget, it says that the police station is requesting for $185,000 for security cameras down to the police station. That's what I was looking at. I highlighted, but I looked at the wrong page. So my question is, you're requesting for $185,000 for cameras just to cover the police station. I would think the neighborhoods would be more important. I mean, how many people coming down to the police station to mess with y'all? Well, I mean, but nowadays you never know. But but I'm just saying, I see where you're requesting $185,000 for security cameras down to police station.
Yeah, Councilwoman Oliver, that I know Inspector Ash hit on that a little bit early. She touched on it, but these existing cameras that we've had in this facility for more than a couple of decades, and Inspector Ash, can you just explain? There's a lot of things that we have inside where there's liabilities that we're at holding areas for prisoners, where we process people in the facility, around the facility. And these things we're not adding new cameras. What we're doing is we're replacing the ones that were in place. And these are some of the things that you just hit on, recent issues that are going, in the last year, I'd say, or last 7 or 8 months, these facilities, and especially police facilities, seems to be a target. And what I hope we're coming out of all this from last year, but seems to be the place that is where individuals that, although we're protecting their First Amendment rights for free speech and everything, but there are some nefarious actors that want to do damage not only to the police station but to other facilities. And we have certain standards from the Commission on Law Enforcement Training that come in for a certification to make sure that we stay with that. It's been one of their recommendations, and this is a year that, with everything going on, we made the decision to ask for that in our budget. Inspector Ash, is anything I missed on that?
No, sir, you summed it.
How many, Mr. Chair, may I follow up with that?
Yes, please.
Wait, real quick. So how many cameras would that provide you with the 185,000, roughly?
We can get you that answer for the amount of cameras. This is both internal and external in our facility. Councilman Oliver and Finance Chair, can we get back to you on that one? Is that okay? I want to be accurate.
Sure.
Yes, please do, Chief. All right. At this time, I would like to, I know we are running short on time, so I'd like to run to question 13. Discuss the planned use of approximately $246,000 budget for consultants and public safety director positions.
Oh, can we go to the next page? So on this, we have every 2 years, we're obligated to have sergeants and lieutenants test. That's actually be budgeted in for 2022. The fitness, psychological, academy materials is for the upcoming class. The youth response unit, we had talked about this earlier, and I went through everything that they do, making sure that that additional costs go there. And clear, we actually pay $7K a year for them to come in to certify us, and there's only about 6% of the 18,000 police departments have the full certification that we have. And they're making sure not only are we have good policy, but we also following the policy that's in place. And in cities that are accredited in police departments, it actually brings down liabilities, and that's an additional oversight that we have. So we pay $7,000 a year for that.
And Chief, just to follow up, I see 76,000 earmarked for the youth response unit. Is there thoughts? I guess we'll see what happens with the CARES Act funding. Is there thoughts about increasing that so it's more than just 2 full-time employees? Because I believe that's a theme of many colleagues we've inquired about increasing these kind of services.
If there's an opportunity to get there and what the rules are as how that money could be used, I think we have to look at all these things, Mr. Chairman, and we're willing to look at these things, and the voices are being heard.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Can you discuss the planned use of a $750,000 for comp time payouts? What is that?
If we can go to the next slide. Okay, come back. I'm sorry. Let's go back to 14 answer. My apologies. These are based on department's attrition rate. When officers leave, they have comp time. That's paid out upon retirement, as well as anticipated retirements and contractual requirements. Some of the things is that when you get promoted, there's a certain amount that you can carry over from the rank that you're at that we have to pay you out, because we don't want people building up so much time as they go up the ranks, because if it stays within the rank and then we pay them out in their new rank, they're going to get paid at the hourly rate that they're in. So you want to make sure that you pay them out in the ranks that they're at, only because it's actually making an investment and you're going to get a larger payout. And this is budgeted in coordination with the Office of Management and Budget.
All right, thank you, Chief. Now turning to question 15, can you discuss the planned use of approximately $549,000 between account lines for uniforms and ammo? This is an increase, approximately $56,000 over last year.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right, as we go down, you can see the 113 for uniforms, equipment, and communications personnel. And for the recruits, $75,000, which 50% cost is picked up by grant funding. The $9,000 for retirement of a canine, replacing canine. 4,500 school crossing guard shoe allowance, that's contractual. Another 2,500 for the riding boats. For a motorcycle unit, contractual cost every 2 years. We're in that cycle right now. And then taser equipment, which we've gone in through the public safety meetings and overall council meetings. that we've talked about. Currently, 260 officers are equipped. The new contract with the with tasers, they're going to equip all our officers, 319 officers. That's going to be 175,000. And the ammunition line, which is, it's incredible what's happening with ammunition, that the costs have gone up exponentially, and the demand, and to be able to get ammunition so we can make sure that we train our officers 3 times a year, which is a COPT standard, which talks about use of force, de-escalation, and firearms qualifications. The vendors, we have to order almost 3 years out, because if we wait till each year, we're not going to receive the ammunition. It's just that dire straight. And I think a lot of it, we're being told by the manufacturers, is that because it's COVID related situation, that they haven't been able to keep up with demand because of bringing their workers in.
Now, Chief, just follow up on taser. Approximately how long has, or do you know how long the city of Wilmington has used tasers for the department?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to go back with an historical perspective, and someone's been working closely with this. If I could have Inspector Ash answer this question, may I?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The question is about historically, how long has city of Wilmington used the tasers? Because I noticed it's now an increase in using this type of, force. So what is the historical perspective?
I believe, if I'm correct, and Inspector Emery can correct me, but I want to say probably about 2013, or Master Corporal Nelly Vega could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 2013.
And how are officers trained? Or are they trained to use tasers instead of firearms?
Chief, if I may, can I defer? I would defer to Inspector Emery on that, who runs the academy and the training division.
Yeah, essentially I'm getting into why the increased use of tasers.
Well,
is there a specific reason?
So, if I may, it's not, Chief, did you want me to answer that?
Go ahead, Inspector, finish up, please.
It's not an increase in, this is providing all officers the capability of a taser. Typically, what has happened in the past is we had piecemealed all of these contracts and done what we could afford. And so we had the opportunity at this point with taser to do a full upgrade of the department. And one of the things that's also crucial about this complete upgrade of all 319 is, as the technology progresses, there will be an overlay in that technology that will feed into the body-worn camera. So this was the opportunity of where we wanted to strike while the iron was hot, and try to get the officers, every officer equipped with tasers, because as City Council knows, officers work extra jobs, even if you're somebody that is typically administration or more in-house. And as we equip all of the officers with body-worn cameras, we also would equip them to have those tasers so that they could eventually overlay that technology. But again, I'll defer to Inspector Emery on the specific training.
Okay. Anything, Inspector Emery, to add?
Just real quick, the taser is a less lethal device that's used. We go through a progression with uses of force. They are trained once a year on a taser, in which they have to shoot off dummy darts. So everybody knows how they feel. Everyone who has a taser has felt what it feels like, and continually train on them. They have to check them every day before they go on service, make sure the battery life is good. And it's a device that we've been using for years.
Okay, thank you, Inspector. I believe Council President Congo has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Didn't Council pass a resolution for regarding tasers earlier this year? Can anyone speak to that? I can't remember where exactly it was. But
Yes, actually, the council did approve for that, the additional funding, making sure that we can have the academy class that's getting out at the end of the month to make sure that they can be equipped with the Axon Taser equipment. And as this contract goes through, we're going to have 319 officers. But the approval by council was for the additional money for the recruits to make sure they're equipped when they come out of the academy. And it was a grant, sir.
okay, and this 175 doesn't cover the whole department.
No.
Okay.
It doesn't. But we tried to. I'm sorry. I'm getting. You have it.
No, I was just saying. Okay, thanks for clearing it up for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Finance Chair, I'm sorry. Someone just let me know that the 170 now, although we had the grant that was approved, but the 170 does cover the whole police department. Now that we're folding over to 319 for the whole department. So we're going to, instead of 260, then we asked for, you approved a grant that offsets some of these costs, and the 170 is for the whole department for 319 in the upcoming budget. My apologies.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Now turning to question 16, can you discuss the approximately $390,000 budgeted for other fees? This is an increase from last fiscal year.
Yes, this is up 24,000. This goes into laboratory fees. This goes into DWI blood withdrawals. It goes into our DNA process. It goes into our rape kits. All these things are money that's pulled out for our investigations. And the facility management fees, which we had talked about at a prior public safety meeting where we were able to, it was agreed upon for the next 3 years for the increases for the generator services. And now our dumpster collection now has to be done by a private contractor where it was done by Public Works because of the change in their type of equipment and truck that they have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. If you turn to question 17, can you discuss the update on authorize and receive grant funds for fiscal year 2021 and where we are year to date? I understand that a lot of this we already have touched on, especially the body grants, but is this the latest update you have?
Yes, sir. As you can see on this page, it goes through each and one of the grants that we apply for, some every year, to make sure that and they've been approved by council. You can see the numbers, and then just for everybody's edification, some spell out what these grants are for. But SALLE, S-A-L-L-E, that's state aid to local enforcement. ED is the emergency drug enforcement investigation OT. SLEEF is where we get the special law enforcement assistant funds. And then HIDA is the high intensity drug trafficking area. So if you have any questions on this, instead of going through them all, it's up there and the balances that are left.
Okay, thank you.
Next page goes into our SROs. It goes into the amount as far as grant funds coming from each specific school for the SROs and the amount that we're reimbursed. And then Department of Highway Safety, we got a couple of grants each jurisdiction, depending on the size of the jurisdiction in the state of Delaware, received these grants for highway safety. And then the last one is to support implementation of the body-worn camera. We were awarded the federal grant. We've talked about this probably for the last year on how to get to where we are, and it will be rolling out this program very, very shortly. We're completing the installation of equipment in our building, and we're planning to schedule a training of all personnel. We had talked about getting this out before the summer. By the end of May, we should start seeing if the training's done. And as we cascade the training, we should start to see the officers rolling out at the end of May and progressively getting the whole department trained and out there with the cameras. But we should start seeing this towards the end of May.
All right. Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't see them. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you. A hypothetical question. Can a council member possibly sit in or be exposed to the training for the body cameras? I know this has happened with the installation of new equipment in other departments or in, the police department.
Inspector Ash, do we see anything in this training that would prevent this from this happening?
I don't see anything, but I would defer to the city solicitor.
Okay.
Just make sure everyone's protected.
Okay. So the answer is we will get back with that answer for you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Chris? Mr. Chair?
I can hear you, Xanthia.
Sorry, we were on mute. Councilmember Oliver, the floor is yours.
Now, I just wanted to thank the chief and his staff for doing a great job. Y'all continue the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. To question 18, can you discuss the proposed budgetary technology requests for this fiscal year?
So we requested 32 additional cellular lines for investigations and criminal investigation division and street crimes unit. These 17 of these 32 will be used in new police vehicles for internet connectivity, onboard GPS. So the importance is making sure that our detectives, when they're going out to these scenes and doing their investigation, they have the proper equipment while they're out there, that they can exchange information in a timely manner. And then when it comes to the cellular line set up in new police vehicles, this is part of the overall strategy and making sure that we have the technology and leverage the same officers in the same area, that they stay on the street. So sometimes you'll see the officers parked in a certain location that they can do most of the work, and then print out what they need within the vehicles. So instead of having to go all the way from the 14th or 13th district, coming all the way in to headquarters, I could keep my officers being able to respond from the areas that they're in, and at the same time do the paperwork. And these cellular lines help us, overall with the overall strategy of keeping officers on the street.
Okay. All right, and turning to 19, can you discuss any proposed capital budget requests? I believe you have a Marine unit request and also a armored personnel carrier request.
So this, on page, so these capital budget requests, the department is requesting replacement of a current boat utilized for the Marine unit patrols, investigation, search and rescue, mutual aid. And then out of the requests, even in this current environment, everything gets shut down. Although the president is not in the city, but he certainly areas around the city in a Coast Guard have asked for our assistance, and also during the summer months in search and rescue to help do the things that we need to do. And when it comes to the Marine unit, and secondly, it's beyond its service life. The cost of maintaining the one that we have in place in the end is to make sure that if we replace it, it's certainly going to save us a lot in the maintenance that's happening now. As far as the wheeled armored personnel carrier, we're requesting replacement of the current armored rescue vehicle personnel carrier. This transports our tactical officers to and from dangerous situations and assess with protection and rescue of members of the public who are in harm's way and ensure public and officer safety during volatile situations. The current vehicle is beyond its service life, and it took a lot of damage, unfortunately, when Trooper Ballard was killed 4 years ago, and they actually asked our help with Pennsylvania State Police, Maryland State Police, Delaware, Newcastle County, and the FBI, that our vehicle outside a location that was getting fired at took a lot of hits to it. It's beyond its service life. I know some people are adverse to these type of vehicles, but used properly, in the right way. I can't speak for where they might not have been used in the proper way in other areas that have caused concern, but I assure you that this allows us to slow down situations, have a perimeter, keep people safe. And I've personally been involved in other jurisdictions where I've worked, where we were able to evacuate civilians and keep them safe from active shooters because of these type of vehicles. And at the same time, get some tactical advantage of what's going on to slow things down, to keep people safe, where, you know, if we just go into locations without the protection of this, you're sure to have situations that might end in an officer's death or the person that might have mental health issues death. So we want to make sure that we have this type of vehicle to get to these locations, slow it down, and then make sure that we can come to some safe, successful conclusions to incidents. And it's used time and time again. This is not just waiting. It's used a lot in my time it's been here, and it's been used in other departments. So that's just something that I feel it's after its service life, and they've been asking a couple of years, and it's come to a time where this is one of the asks on the budget that I'm asking.
Is there federal money available for the armored vehicles?
Well, it was opened back up a few years ago, but then because there's certain advocacies that when it comes to military grade equipment, that sometimes I think there's been decisions now that it might be off the table. I'm still exploring, can we get something like this? Believe me, we've tried and we've explored this, but at this time, we're asking to go to the capital budget to make sure, to see if we can get these things, because I don't see a path forward on a current armored vehicle in this environment right now. Inspector Ash, am I missing anything as far as on these grants?
No, sir, you're accurate. The federal government will not pay for these vehicles anymore.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And lastly, just finishing out, Chief, can you just show the organizational chart?
Absolutely. Let's go to the organizational chart. This actually breaks down, you can see underneath the Chief of Police, Chief's Aid, Policy and Communications, Fiscal Unit, Public Information, Office of Professional Standards, Real-Time Crime Center, Inspector of Operations, who's underneath, and Inspector of Administration, balancing out the department. And as you can see, you know, the department moving some of the critical units under the Chief of Police, where there's no one in between, especially when it comes to, you know, professional standards, internal affairs, the real-time crime, public information. They're very, sometimes in other departments, they're buried in other places. If you're going to run an effective police department, in my experience, they have to be underneath the Chief of Police and with the immediate guidance. If you go to the next page. This takes us authorized strength, 319. When I look at the 285, if you see that, that's not including the 19 officers that are in the academy. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. And it says it on the bottom as a qualifier. So just in case when people start doing the numbers, and then it breaks it out where they are, what rank they are, and what division is, right down to the platoons, street crimes, and downtown unit. And if we can go to the last page. This breaks down our civilian personnel in the department, shows where we have our vacancies and what and where we're going to look to fill those vacancies, and we're actively doing that. That breaks down to 94 civilian personnel. Next page, please. And Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation. If there's any more questions, sir.
Okay, Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to compliment the chief and his department for a job well done.
Thank you, ma'am.
And you're fighting a downhill battle. Behavior change takes years, sometimes generational. So I just say good luck and hope we can do something about the shootings. But thank you for all the work you and your department have done. That's all.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Okay, and while council members are thinking if they have any further questions, I would like to kick it to members of the public. if there's any public comments at this time. All right, going once, going twice. All right, I'm now going to turn to any council members and see if there's any final questions or comments by council. No, it's been a lot tonight. All right, you wouldn't mind?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm sorry. I was looking for my hand. Thank you. Actually, I had I'm sorry. I had a constituent who asked me a question, and I typed it to you. It was as we replace old equipment, what is done with the outdated devices? I thought that you get to that. It was just a simple question.
There's some things that, as we do outdated equipment, we can sell them back to the vendor. They're prorated at a cost. Some I'd have to defer to Inspector Cecilia Ash and Inspector Emery, but I know for some that when we switched over our firearms, we were asking at a time because we can get the most money at the time from a vendor to offset the cost of new equipment. When it comes to what we talked about here, I'm not sure when it comes to the technology, if it's so outdated, is there any value left to that, Inspector?
So, sir, you are accurate and in every statement that you've made thus far. So I don't have anything additional.
Thank you, Inspector.
Thank you.
All right, Chief. Any just brief closing comments about the budget?
Mr. Chair and council members of the public and administration, thank you very much for giving us that opportunity. Thank you very much for the support that you give our officers in the city, and we want to continue. We've talked about most of the strategies here, but community partnership and trying to continue to build trust is what's going to get us to where we need to be. We've got a lot of work to do. We're up for the challenge, and thank you for an opportunity to present today, and I look forward to continue partnership and working together.
Thank you very much, Chief, for the very thorough budget hearing. And as a housekeeping matter, I know we are a little over time, that we have had folks on the line for hours, so we will grant a 10-minute break. So we will reconvene at 7:53 p.m. Exactly, and we will begin with the fire department, and that'll be our last hearing for the evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.